Week one of LCS is in the books. We got Cloud9 making some new picks in the mid lane, FlyQuest picking some weird things in the top lane. Lots to talk about from the games this weekend. We go over a few things like, is LS actually 5 head? Does Champions Queue save NA? Hopefully it does. And is TSM doomed? We will hop into all of that in just a little bit. But first, JT, we wanted to talk a little bit about the co-streams. By the way, this is episode 72 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. J&T, I know you wanted to talk about co-streams, so do I. Let's start with that. What did you feel about not having the co-streams this weekend?
I thought it was gonna be not as how am I supposed to phrase this? I thought it was gonna be worse than it was, and it was actually good. Like I don't think it was bad, because there weren't any co-streams. Like I didn't mind it at all. But I'm a bit weary that was because, or wary, whatever, however you say the word.
Yeah.
That was because there was a lot of good games this weekend. Like, and I feel like when we do get into the week threes, the week fives, the week sevens, the week eights, and stuff like that, when LCS normally becomes a little bit more stale, the meta has sort of been figured out, and teams are sort of riding their beginning and end of season highs and lows. I feel like that's when we're going to feel it a little bit more when LCS does get a little bit more stale and, things aren't as wide open because it feels like after week one, anything is possible at this point.
Yeah, see, I didn't actually miss them, but I've always been of the opinion that, like, even though I preferred the co-streams, I still liked the regular broadcast a lot anyways. So that was one thing. It was like whatever. And like honestly, I love listening to Captain Flowers and Azale. Like that's the duo that I love casting. So I liked hearing them again. That was great. But I will have to admit that in between games, it's freaking boring. Like in between games is way better listening to the TriCast, in my opinion, than listening to the analyst desk. Like analyst desk is instant mute. I don't know if you feel that way.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. Like, even during the co-stream, sometime, like I'm always, I mainly only care about the gameplay. Like if, like I'll just find something else to do in between games, whether that's just like browse Twitter or Reddit or like play a quick game of something. Like I'd rather do
Yeah.
that normally in between games because it literally is like anywhere between a 15 to 25 minute wait. But just in terms of the gameplay itself, because I mean that's really what I was focusing in on, is it didn't
Hmm.
really feel like I was missing out on too much because, like you said, the casting duos in NA I think have been getting a lot better, or are a lot better nowadays than they were 2 or 3 years ago. I think the sort of caster dynamics and the duos and the sort of pairs that they work in have been very successful, and I think they all work off of each other really, really well. And I think that's a credit to all the casters and sort of like the broadcast team in that regard, because I think they have sort of figured out the in-game formula quite well. Um, and it felt fine. I just think that should we get more of the repetitiveness that we normally see in LCS when the picks are the same and like drafts are similar, and everyone's gonna have the same game plan of, okay, first two dragons, or like this team is going for Rift Herald every game, then we might sort of miss out on the co-streams where we do want to find like those funny comments that are in there, or like some sort of like analysis or breakdown from like a higher level.
Yeah, so the one time that I found myself missing the co-stream was I would have liked to have known what they thought about the games with like Janna top, for example, or like, hey, if you're in this game, what are you doing as this team or that team right now? But at the same time, I thought Azale did a great job of explaining what each team should be doing in his opinion. And again, Azale's another opinion that I like. I respect a lot. So it's like if I watch the TriCast, I'm missing his opinion, and if I watch the regular broadcast, then I'm missing the co-stream's opinion. And so I would have liked to hear what they thought about all because these are like totally new strats, right? This has just been discovered within the last month or so. And so I think a lot of teams are still trying to figure out what to do with these strats. And that's where I would have loved to have heard what Sneaky Medios and Doublelift would have thought about that. However, at the same time, and they brought this up on Hotline League tonight, which I thought was a really good point, was during the FlyQuest CLG game, there's a good chance that Doublelift, Medios, and Sneaky would have just been shitting on the gameplay the whole time, and maybe it would have been less enjoyable. And I thought that Azale and Flowers made that game really, really hype. Like that game was a clown fiesta, pun intended. But that game was also really fun to watch, and I think that they did a really good job hyping it up. And I don't think we would have gotten that with the TriCast. So there's always like a balance that you need to have there. And I thought that even though there was no TriCast, I really, really enjoyed that game. I might not have if there was a TriCast.
Yeah, I think I agree with. There's definitely the possibility that um the co-streams, whoever the co-stream is, because I know on our show at least we always talk about the the Sneaky Medias and Doublelift one, but I mean there are
Well, it's
still
the
other.
one we watch, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean like people like LS in the past and I Will Dominate equally had those same visceral reactions to quote
Yeah,
unquote bad gameplay and would flame accordingly. So it's not something exclusive just to those three, because it did feel like that was sort of the culture behind it. But I
yeah.
definitely agree with the point that it it could have been flipped on its head should the co-streaming been there. Although I still think that the co-streaming outright better. But I will admit that this week especially, I didn't notice it too much at all. Like it wasn't even I hadn't even crossed my mind until the games had ended.
Yeah. Then the last thing I want to touch on before we move on to the actual games and the teams from this past weekend is I mentioned how I thought in between games it's hella boring and it's really, really dull. This is something I've floated by you before, so I know you'll have something to say about it. But I think they need to find a way to have less time in between games. I'm so done with Analyst Desk. It's so boring. There's times where like when I listen to like the dive, for example, or any of the podcasts, that's a good time to me to listen to some of the analyst content or just hear some thoughts about the games or whatever. But like in between games, I'm just waiting for the next game. And so it's like you get really hyped up for a game, and then there's like 20 minutes of like just like what I consider to be podcast talk, and that's not when I'm ready for podcast talk. That's where I'm waiting for the next game. And so what I think they could do, and this is very difficult to implement, I admit, but what I think they should do is they should try to implement a way where they have more than one setup. And what I mean by that is you have the 10 PCs on stage. I think they should have a way or try to find a way where they have 10 PCs off stage so that the whole process of cleaning off all the you have to wipe everything down and disinfect because of COVID, and then there's everyone's got to figure they get on stage and oh now there's a mouse problem and there's going to be this delay and blah blah blah. I think you could get all that stuff out of the way if backstage you have them setting up all that stuff and you could sort of rotate setups while the game is happening. So what I mean by that is if game 1 is happening, game 2 is already being set up backstage. People are freaking ready to go and there's not as much of this waste of time and me having to listen to just absolute nonsense in between games. I do think it's very difficult to implement, but I think it's very doable to implement. And yeah, I think that they should try to do something like that. And the only other thing I'll add to that is I think that they should have one break, sort of like a halftime in the NFL. I think either in between game 2 and 3 or game 3 and 4, you could have one break where you do some analyst desk stuff. People have time to get up, go to the bathroom, go make food, whatever it is. But I think that doing that would have the broadcast be about 3 hours rather than 5 hours. I think if you're asking people to commit 5 hours of their Saturday and Sunday, that is one of the reasons why you have a lot less people tuning into the LCS. I think the viewership numbers would go up despite the total hours watched going down because people aren't, well, just sitting there watching like ads and stuff.
To speak on your first point, describing the whole two setup thing, the way I just
Hmm.
pictured that in your mind as you were describing it, like you have your stage, which is on like a circular platform, and like on one side of the circle, you have 10 PC setup, and the other side, you have a 10 PC setup, and the thing just spins around 180
Yes.
degrees.
Yes. Like you see in like old game shows where they just spin shit. That's exactly what I'm talking. I mean, it doesn't have to
Yeah,
be
I don't
that,
know
but
if that's
that
like
could be
possible,
one
but
of the possible things.
yeah, I
Why is that not
mean,
possible though?
I don't know. It seems a lot of wires and moving
Dude, if
parts
like an
there.
old game show from like the 70s or whatever, I don't know when the hell, but whenever if one of those old game shows can do it, then the LCS could as well. And I think that people would be
Seems
way
like a
more
bit of
engaged in the games.
oversimplification there.
Again, I like I said, I don't think it's something that's necessarily easy to do, but I think it is doable. And just because something's not easy doesn't mean you shouldn't. I don't want to oversimplify it because again, like I said, it's not easy, but it is doable.
Yeah, I guess me personally, I do think that the lackluster, well, I guess I will rephrase, in our opinion, myself and Blue Jays, the lackluster analyst desk content and the content that happens between each games is more of the fact that I think, it's not the greatest, and nor do we find it interesting. Because I think if you look on the flip side and you take the LEC, for example, I feel like we're always referencing the LEC, and everyone will always reference the LEC because it's a easy comparison for the
Hmm.
LCS.
Yep.
And for me, when I end up watching the LEC, if am watching it on Saturday morning or Friday morning, I very much enjoy listening to what their analysts and everything have to say, in between games. One, and I think that's mainly because I don't follow the region as closely as I do North America, so it is
Okay.
good to have an outside opinion and a more trained opinion on the matter. Whereas, we look at North America and look at ourselves, like we're following this stuff like 24/7. Like we're watching the matches on Saturdays and Sundays. We're listening to all the news that's coming out on Mondays and Tuesdays, and us two, we're actively talking about it and thinking about it during the week. Whereas you look at a different region or a region you might not follow as much, I think there is a lot of value gained from listening to, your quote unquote analysts on every game. So I just think personally, I think it's something that's necessary in between each games, especially for the average viewer. I just think we're not that kind of viewer, so it doesn't exactly apply to us.
That's a fair point. For me personally, I think the LEC in between games is still just as boring. Again, it's not that I even dislike the analysis. It's just that's not when I'm ready for the analysis. I think you have like a roller coaster of like the games are hella hype, and then you got to wait 20 minutes for the next game to start, and like the analysis kind of brings you back down where it's like, man, I just want more hype gameplay. That's the problem that I have. The other thing that I have to say as well, and like that I've kind of glossed over, but I haven't actually forgotten, is that in between games is the time that you plug sponsors and stuff like that. So there's money to be made in between games. I'm not saying they shouldn't do the commercials and all that crap, to be quite honest. Like that's stuff that you still have to do. I just think specifically the analyst desk stuff takes too long. And again, maybe to J and T's point, maybe I am oversimplifying it in the sense that like it's not just snap your fingers and do it. And it's that easy. There's a lot to work through there. But again, in the end, I think they could do it. But yeah, what can I say? I've said my piece on it.
Last thing that I will say is I remember one of the things that I was always flaming the broadcast for both last year and season 10 summer was the fact that a game would end and then they would cut right to a 3-minute break and then do the interview, where it seems to be now that they're back to their old format of game ends, you flip to the casters for about like 1 or 2 minutes while they set up an interview, and then they do the interview and then they cut to the analyst desk, and there's not as many of these 3-minute short breaks in between games as opposed to just sort of one longer break after the interview and the analyst desk segments are done. And I've been seeing a lot of positive reactions to both the broadcast itself and the format of the broadcast on Reddit and Twitter over the course of Lock-In and now week one. And I definitely agree that I think the broadcast, the way that they formatted it this year, is much better. The LCS sort of rebrand is kind of feeling like it's hitting a bit more now. Felt like when they announced it at the beginning of last year, it was just kind of like, well, this is weird. But now it actually sort of does feel like the LCS has a little bit of personality to it, and you can tell like they changed up the whole like in studio look and whatnot, and I think it is for the better. So I think they're moving back and towards the right direction. And I think hopefully we continue to see that, because based on the format now is we're going to be seeing a lot more of that broadcast with the lack of co-streams for the majority of the regular season.
Right. That's a good point. Very good point. Yeah, I actually agree. I do think that the broadcast has been, I mean, it's early, but it has been a little bit better. And so you got to give some credit there. Before we move on, I do want to shout out Borbo donating some bits and Slugger with the Prime. We thank you all for subscribing. And on that note, remember to subscribe whether you're listening on Twitch or YouTube or wherever the hell. Hit that sub button, hit the like buttons. All that stuff helps us out quite a bit. Let's get on to the games, JNT, because the games were actually freaking awesome this weekend. I think the games, week one, honestly, to me, exposed just how boring lock in was. Like, I liked lock in, let's be honest. Week one was just so much better than lock in that it was like, oh, damn, like, it's amazing what happens when all the rosters are here and the games matter. Like, there was
Yeah.
a significant difference, I would say. With that said, let's start with Cloud9, right? Is that where we're starting?
Well, okay. We're going team by team. I just had us grouped in the 2-0 team.
Okay, sure. Whatever you want to do. I want to start off with talk. We'll start with Cloud9 though, but I want to know your thoughts on LS specifically because this is the stuff. I mean, this is the talk of the town right now. Like LS has made this league interesting as we expected. Do you think LS is 5 head as we ask in our title, or do you think he's more of a 3 head for some of these moves?
Well, I guess I'll start this off by it feels like like we talked about this last week. Like Cloud9's roster only got here midway through this past week, and I think they even said it themselves. Like they were only practicing as a full team for about 3 days before the season started. And I think then going into the season, and specifically week one, people weren't expecting Cloud9 to look as good as they did. I think the majority of people recognize that, hey, they're probably going to beat Golden Guardians because Golden Guardians was in a similar situation to Cloud9 where they weren't starting their full lineup in lock-in, and they were presumably practicing during that time, but maybe didn't have their full roster with Pride Stalker. But with Cloud9 beating Evil Geniuses on Sunday in a very exciting match, to where we saw another very
Mhm.
creative draft from LS, it feels like that sort of is what propelled Cloud9 up there in terms of like being a talking point, and similarly with LS, because Evil Geniuses was looking like a top two, top three team in this league, coming off of lock-in where they made finals. Yeah, sure, they got shit on by Team Liquid, but we all know how good Team Liquid is. And so for Cloud9 to start the season 2-0, bring out these very creative drafts, playing Enchanter's mid lane, and having a lot of success on it, it feels like it's going to continue to sort of build this narrative throughout the season, you know, which has been the questions all along, is like, is LS actually, a five head? And, he's been so vocal about his various opinions for, it feels like, the last 3 years now, whether it's the shit about Renekton, or whether it's about, his various tier lists that he does like every 3 to 4 months, where he'll have champions in like as his quote unquote Z tier, where everyone's just like, what the fuck, why is Soraka solo lane like Z tier? Well, I think we just saw, at least in the Evil Geniuses game, why he feels that way, and it's just going to be a really interesting dynamic going forward, how you know if this sort of drafting and this sort of gameplay is going to continue from them, or if they are going to sort of revert back to some sort of standard team comps. Because one thing that LS did say, was that the main reason why they wanted to go this route of the Enchantress mid was sort of to catch their opponents off guard, because they felt themselves that they weren't practiced enough to beat teams standard.
Mhm. Yeah, so I actually am going with the yes, he's five head as well, but for different reasons. I don't have that strong of an opinion just yet on the Soraka mid or the Ivern mid, because we saw it over one weekend, right? One game each. I don't think that's a big enough sample size to have a strong opinion one way or the other. The reason why I actually do think he's five head, and I think you might remember that I wanted to talk about this a few weeks ago. We didn't necessarily have time, is because I think the whole idea of trying to buy into a 10-man roster, and I don't even know if they've actually called it a 10-man roster, but that whole idea of like your spot is never secured, you're constantly fighting with the academy counterpart for your spot. I think that is the best way to get the best results for your team. Sorry, I see your
And
your
my
lights flickering
dude, my
it.
lights are all fucked up.
So that's one of the reasons why I do think that was one of the best ways to build your roster, because I think that competition is the best way to not get complacent and to keep your players fighting for a spot. That's one way you will not fall off or lose motivation. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, okay, you could argue it's good or bad the mid lane champions they picked, but specifically for Cloud9 to pick supportive mid lanes, that is the best way Cloud9 has had success ever since Blabber has joined the Cloud9 roster. For people that don't remember, Cloud9 fans will remember that when Niski was on Cloud9, he was known very much as a shove and support, rather shove and roam kind of mid laner, whereas he would just shove and he would support either his side lanes or his jungler. A lot of times it was his jungler Blabber, and that was the best version of Blabber we had seen. This weekend is kind of what we saw with that, specifically with the Olaf. You can't give Blabber Olaf. And by having a supportive mid, hopefully we can start to see Blabber go back to what we saw him in, was it 2020, I think it was, the last time Niski was here. That's what I think is the best thing about this. Not even so much whether Ivern or Soraka is good mid, but the supportive style of playing around Blabber is exactly where I think Cloud9 will find success. And so for that reason, I think it's five hit. Sorry to go on a little rant there.
Well, I think it's interesting because recently, from all that I've heard and talked about, or sorry, heard and listened to, is that a lot of pros are basically saying that mid lane is the most important role in the meta right now. I thought that was a
Yeah.
bit surprising, because I thought it was AD carry. Just from the champions that are in the meta right now, the amount of damage that we're seeing out of champs like Aphelios and Jinx and whatnot. So I was kind of surprised to hear that majority of the people think that mid lane is the most important role, and I just wonder, therefore, how supportive mid laners, quote unquote, sort of fit into that meta, because it does feel like the meta is heavy control mage, and then you have your kind of outlier champions in like the Twisted Fate and the Silas, which are kind of like yes, obviously a roamer, and Silas is more of a bruiser fighter. But for the most part, like the top champions right now are control mages. I don't even know if you classify Corki as a control mage, but he fills the same role that those kind of control mage champions do. And I just wonder, moving forward, if this is going to be a viable strat, or if something as simple as you just ban out, the enchanters mid, or if there's too many to do that, because we're seeing a ton of enchanters in the meta, not even just in the mid lane. We saw it in FlyQuest games this weekend. They rolled with the smite top strategy. We saw champions like Janatop, Karma top. I mean, I've spoken about this. Feels like 2 weeks in a row now. Lorlo is sort of like been the main person in North America to sort of bump up this strategy and make it very well known. And from everything that I've heard from him, it's just like you can do this with pretty much any support champion in the top lane. Like it's not exclusive to Janna and Karma, although I think he said that those are the two best champions for it.
Yeah.
There are picks like Bard top that he's like working on. Zillion top he says is just as good, and Zillion's obviously a super strong mid laner. Like I feel like Zillion, if Fudge could pick that up and sort of learn that champion, like that is the perfect champion to have Blabber going off on Olaf, or
Completely
even
agree.
throw back to season 8 when he was doing it with Kindred. So it feels like this style for Cloud9 right now, if this is something they are going to roll with in the long term, having a lot of enchanters in the support role, in the mid role, and even in the top role, I do think it's unlikely, based on what I personally know about Summit and what he plays. I don't think that we're going to see like Smite top from them or supportive top laners. I think we're more likely to see split push and engage champions. It's just super interesting. I mean, like it just feels like there's sort of endless possibilities with this thing, and feels like we'll be like kind of on the edge of our seats on a week to week basis, waiting for the Cloud9 games and like waiting to see what they're gonna whip out next.
So the reason why I said before that I'm not totally bought into the whole Soraka or Ivern mid thing is because I need to remind people Fudge was kind of getting clapped in those lanes. Like he was getting hard poked. However, the theory is that I've heard LS say is that you can play Soraka on lower economy than a regular mid laner. So as far as that's concerned, it seems like that's all part of the plan. But you lose a lot of pressure, and honestly, when I look at the EG game or the Golden Guardians game, I can definitely see a world where they lose both of those games, right? Like Pride Stalker was absolutely popping off in the Cloud9 game. He made one mistake where he goes to gank bot lane, and he's like barely in turret range and gets ulted by the Sona and then dies and kind of throws his lead because I think he had a shutdown, and that's where the game started to swing in Cloud9's favor. But up until that point, Pride Stalker was starting to become a really fed Kiana, and honestly, when you can one shot someone, it doesn't matter how much you can heal. If you get one shot, you're kind of screwed. So that was a game that to me was about to get out of hand. The other part is even in the EG game, Jojo Pyun should have had the ability to roam from mid lane and to rotate towards the dragon and didn't. And so I look at that and go, well, you're never going to have Prio. And even though EG had Prio in that particular instance that swung the game in Cloud9's favor, that to me is just a mistake from Jojo Pyun and not getting over to rotate quicker, and Vulcan taking the blast cone over as well. I don't know if you remember which fight I'm talking about, JNT, but he takes the blast cone over and Danny is left a mile away. And so to me, there's two mistakes made on that team fight that swings it in Cloud9's favor that I don't know if Cloud9 can always rely on teams messing up like that. So that's why I'm not ready to buy it just yet. However, it looked pretty freaking cancerous to play against, and those games were hilarious, by the way, I might add. Um, Again, still not a lot to go off of, just two games, but I'm not buying yet. I'm not buying, I'm not selling.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do think that these sort of team comps, they're pretty much just like a scaling draft, and kind of got to recognize like when you're playing scaling, no matter what the scaling is, whether it's just like strong side lanes or like a strong control mid laner, like scaling gets destroyed by good early game and good team coordination and good team fighting. And teams mess up in the early game, or if teams mess up in their team fighting, like your game is going to get doomed no matter what kind of scaling you're playing, whether it's enchanters or whether it's just like strong late game champions. So I don't think these mistakes that both Golden Guardians and EG made are because of the enchanter picks, and the only reason why they got rolled like that was because of the enchanter picks. That this sort of a team comp operates in a similar fashion to a scaling comp, and if you just have a bad early game or don't have a very proactive early game, and you give up dragons and you're giving up Rift Heralds, like you're just gonna lose. Like that's any game of League. Like doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the hell you're playing. Like you're losing first two dragons while having an even gold state. Like that's always advantageous for the team who's taking two dragons. Like the meta that we saw towards the end of season 11 was if you wanted to take the first two dragons and opt for, sort of a soul win condition, like you would lose first two Rift Heralds, or you would at least lose the first one, and presumably the enemy team would be up at least 1.5 thousand gold. And we just didn't see that in those games. And I think that's partially because we are so far early into the season. Teams aren't practiced enough. And as LS himself said, like we're trying to throw people off. Like they're not going to know how to play against this.
Yeah, and that's totally there. I have no problem with it doing that because Fudge did not look the greatest in lock-in. Not that he should have, but he didn't look the greatest in lock-in. And so, hey, why not try to bring out some? I don't even know if I want to call them cheese picks because this could be a strat that you keep. Like if you find that it works and it works well for your team, that's something that you could play for the rest of the year if you find that it fits your style and it does work. So maybe it's not even a cheese pick. I don't even know how to like I don't even know what to call it, but regardless, I have no problem with them trying something different, especially when you have a mid laner that is still in the process of trying to learn the damn lane. He's been playing it for like a month and a half or 2 months or whatever. So, anyways, I got mostly nothing but good things to say about Cloud9. If there are some areas that I could be a little bit more pessimistic, I suppose, I would say that like I didn't think Summit looked that great this weekend. A lot of times getting caught in side lanes. You could give some credit to Impact, and we'll talk a little bit about Impact with the Tryndamere game that he played into the what was it, the Gnar? No, it was the Camille. I think that Summit got caught out quite a few times in side lanes and allowed Impact to get out of hand. So I think that Summit we should expect better things out of, especially with how good he was in the LCK. I'm expecting a little bit more, but for the most part, C9's looking pretty good. Berserker had a pretty good Ophelios game popped off, so I think C9 fans should be pretty happy.
Yeah, last thing I'll say about it is, especially when you can play these sort of team comps, is just the threat of it is almost as good as playing it, because these team like this it just results in bans from the enemy team. Like
Yeah.
Cloud9 played one game of Ivern mid yesterday, and it already hit the ban list the day after. And we'll even have to see going into next week, what bans are going to be like against Cloud9, especially on the first 3 bans or even 4 or 5 bans. Because if mid lane hasn't been picked yet, the enemy team might just be banning, or Ivern Soraka, or Karma Soraka, or Karma, whatever order of operations you want your enchanters to be, and then they don't even have to go that route. Like they can just do whatever they want. Like it wasn't like
Yeah.
Cloud9 sort of pigeonholed themselves down this route right when they drafted a 1-2-3 in both of those games. It was kind of just like, hey, we're picking strong bot lane, picking our jungler, and at least the first game, jungler who can flex top lane, and they saw the opportunity and went for it. I feel like that's sort of the perfect way of doing this sort of a draft is being flexible in your first 3 picks, and then assessing the situation on 4 or 5 after the bans.
It's a really good point because honestly, you are opening up to a lot of different draft possibilities. And for just a little reminder, draft matters a lot in pro play. And being able to have so many draft weapons in your arsenal it's quite an advantage to you. And being unpredictable is obviously something that teams will probably have a rough time with drafting against Cloud9 specifically, since they have what seems to be so many different avenues that they can take as far as draft is concerned. Anyways, that was quite a bit of talk on Cloud9 as expected. There's lots of Cloud9 stuff to talk about. Let's get into some Dignitas talk because they are 2-0. Actually, before we do that, I want to shout out Hodo's Angel who subscribed. Thank you for giving us the prime. A quick shout out to you. Okay, now let's talk about Dig. 2-0 weekend. People were talking about whether they should start to buy the hype after lock-in. You and I were mostly on the buy angle.
Hmm.
I was definitely on the buy angle. I would have had them fourth, and you had them like fifth. So I think that we could definitely say that we were both on the buy angle because originally before that we were like putting them ninth and 10th in power rankings, was it?
I didn't, you did, but that's okay.
Oh, my mistake. Where did you have them?
I don't know, like 7th or 8th.
Oh, okay. And
I
then,
think I
then you
had
pushed
them.
them
I
up to a
think I have
five
them. I
for,
think I had them. I mean, we didn't officially do them on this show, but I think I had them anywhere
yeah.
between. I think I had them 7, and that was main River acquisition. And dude, he looks good, man. Like
Yeah.
that guy's good.
Regardless, we had them definitely lower, and after lock-in we both thought, okay, this team is actually more than what than meets the eye, and yes, they are looking really good. Like you said, River looks amazing on the Jarvan. You know what's one thing that actually stood out to me specifically about his Jarvan more than I've seen any other Jarvan is he will find ways to gap close better than any Jarvan without using his EQ. Like that is the regular combo you see out of a Jarvan. You see EQ into R, and that's how you gap close. I don't know how he manages to find so many angles where he could just use his R and then figure out afterwards whether he wants to follow up with his EQ or get out with his EQ. JNT, you're a Jarvan player. I'm sure you've had this happen to you many times before, where you EQ R and you're stuck inside the Cataclysm where you necessarily don't always want to be. And so that was one thing that stood out to me. And I know that's really specific, but I was really, really impressed with his ability to find angles, get the engage, and not necessarily have to stay in the Cataclysm while locking in the whole enemy team. And that was one of the things that, yeah, I don't know, just one standout thing. He looked really good.
That's why I take commencing stopwatch, and Inspired's the only NA jungle who does that. So,
Well, why do it when you're able to find the R angles without having to EQ in? You could R, lock everyone in, and EQ out.
dude,
Huh?
it just like stopwatches were 650 gold. You should always buy Guardian Angel on
I
Jarvan
know
or
you're a
buy
big
Zhonya's.
stopwatch guy.
You
I
take
actually I
stopwatch every
agree though.
time.
I
Don't fucking
agree.
take boots. Boots is trash.
Anyways,
Don't take
yeah,
free ass boots on Jarvan. Take stopwatch. Swear to God. Inspired's the only one who does it. I haven't seen a single NA jungler do it outside of Inspired. I don't even think people in EU do it. So like, I don't
Tell
even know. Inspired's literally the only person who does it. Like, copy Inspired, bro.
tell me how you really feel.
I don't know, dude. Just take stopwatch and everything will be okay. But
Okay, but even outside of River, honestly, the team's looking pretty good everywhere else. The only spot, and I know I said this last week, but I will say I'm still not that sold on Fake God. He's kind of just hanging out. He's not he hasn't been the liability that I thought he would be, so that's good. But specifically, I'm really impressed with Biofrost. I thought for sure he would be a liability, and he is one of the reasons they are winning these games.
yeah,
Specifically against TSM, Spica couldn't do shit. Wherever Spica was trying to make an invade on the jungle or trying to make a gank, Biofrost was always there, and you could kind of give credit to the whole team for tracking the enemy jungler, but Biofrost was always in the right spot with the Thresh and didn't allow Spica to do anything. So big time shout out and pop off to Biofrost.
yeah. I mean, their bot lane, in my opinion, is probably outside of River is obviously the main reason why this team is finding a lot of success. I know people are giving Blue a lot of credit, and rightfully so. I think Blue is playing. He's playing pretty well for the most part.
Yeah, he's been good.
He's
Yeah,
not making the same mistakes that he was making in lock-in because it felt like he was getting picked off a lot and being a little too over aggressive in the mid lane when it came to like pushing out waves or even in side lanes for that matter. But it just feels like I haven't heard anybody talk about their bot lane. Like Neo is playing insane right now. Like we saw it at the tail end of lock-in. We're seeing it in week one. Like Neo is looking really good, and I think both of us were a little bit concerned with the Biofrost pick and. Obviously, this guy is a perceived downgrade over Aframu, but doesn't look like it right now. I mean,
hasn't looked like it. Nope.
they look great.
Mm,
I think for me,
yeah,
like jungle and bot lane, it's looking really strong. And when you have a very strong bot lane and jungle, I mean, I would kind of compare this team a little bit to like 100 Thieves, just the way that the team operates, where they have a very aggressive early game jungler, in River, and then they have a really resource heavy bot lane in Neo Biofrost, and then you just have these solo laners that just need to do their job and survive. And that's what they're doing right now. I mean, yeah, sure, Fake God in the past has been a liability, but when Fake God is able to do what he doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes, the team looks pretty good. I mean, they were a top 5 team in season 11 spring.
and you
There,
could
there's
make
there's
the
no there's
argument
no indications why they can't do that this split.
you could make the argument that, well, while they are 2-0, well, they're 2-0 against other teams that are 0-2. And rather than look at it that way, I think the reason those teams are 0-2 is because they ran into Dignitas. That's personally where I'm coming at it from. Do I
I
think there are
agree with
bigger
that.
tests? Do I think there are bigger tests in the LCS than TSM and Immortals? Absolutely. But I think one of the biggest reasons those teams have looked like they're struggling a lot early is because Dignitas has just been better.
I
So
100% agree with that. I think just to say that they've faced teams or two is taking the credit away from Dig.
right. Yeah, and I don't think that that's the way people should be looking at it, personally, and I guess you seem to agree with that. Uh, where do you want to go next? FlyQuest or 100?
We'll do 100 Thieves quickly, because despite them getting bounced and lock in by Dignitas, I feel like to say that 100 Thieves is no longer like a top team or like you would take a Cloud9 and Evil Geniuses, a Team Liquid, or like even a Dig or a TSM over them is just crazy talk. Like we know this team is really good. Their first game, they obviously they took down Team Liquid. I was pretty impressed by them from top to bottom. I did pick 100 Thieves to win that game,
Yes, you did.
but I do think for me, that game specifically was just more about sort of Team Liquid's inactivity.
I
Like
agree.
100 Thieves just it would like that game was just like classic 100 Thieves once again, where he just poster just he plays for bot lane, dude. Like that's what they drop Herald's bot, they play for tower play spot. Like FPI is just insanely fed on Aphelios. Like I don't know, like it just like that was bread and butter 100 Thieves what we saw against Team Liquid.
Well, and the thing is, we've been talking when 100 Thieves was struggling a little bit in the lock-in tournament. We kind of talked about how this team is going to need to find new ways to win. However, the game against TL, their way to win was just to wait. Like because of the outscaling that you get with the Ornn items, like they didn't need to make much happen. The onus was on TL to make stuff happen, and the only time that they really did that was when they tried to take Dragon, and they did it without sweeping. And then 100 Thieves just punished it really hard. FBI hit a nice ulti from the Aphelios, and honestly, I think FBI was the main reason why they ended up winning that game. FBI was an absolute stud and popped off, and I mean, hey, you got to give credit to FBI for being the carry that we know he can be, and that's what he was in that game.
Quick little interruption. Shout out to Slugger for the 10 gifted. Legend.
Yes, thank you, Slugger.
But just
We appreciate the 10 subs. Thank
just to
you.
sort of like flip back to like, you know, PLs and like their game plan in this game, like it was just so bizarre to see them pick like Renekton Jarvan and just do nothing for 20 minutes. Like he didn't do anything. And it was just so apparent once like two items came through that they were like super outscaled. Like I don't remember when exactly it was in the game, but there was like a 4v4 team fight happening like towards Baron where like teams were jockeying for vision. And they had like picture in picture them showing Renekton and Ornn 1v1ing in the top lane. And Renekton is literally tickling Ornn at two items.
Yeah.
And like the fight lasted like 25 seconds, and Orm was basically full HP, and Renekton was like leaving the fight with 1 HP, and it was just so bizarre to me. That just like that whole game out of Team Liquid was so confusing because I felt like 100 Thieves had this scaling like without a doubt. Like I don't know, one of the takes that I've been hearing recently, and like Doublelift feels like he talks about this all the time, was how he thinks that like Jinx is the best like scaling AD right now.
Mhm.
And I've always thought that like isn't that, like Aphelios is just like way more insane, dude. Like that champion deals way too much champion. I can definitely agree that team fighting with Jinx is probably a lot easier than team fighting with Aphelios because you just have like that extra safety and like the massive range. And once you get like that lethal tempo fully stacked, because Aphelios doesn't always run lethal tempo, like they run a lot of PTA or Conquer or something like that. It's just crazy. Like, I don't know. Like, the scaling was so 100 Thieves favored. Yeah, sure, Team Liquid took the first two Drakes, but, like, they just went so AFK. Like, this is one of the games where, like, if it was any other team than Team Liquid, like, I'd be really pissed off in the fact that, like, wow, we just, like, they just rolled over and died and didn't even try. Because that's what it felt like. Like, if this was CLG and they were playing an early game comp and didn't do shit and then just, like, rolled over and die, I feel like everyone would be, like, flaming the fuck out of CLG. And I feel like this somewhat applies to TL here, where pick this early game focused draft with this like huge early game topside, Renekton Jarvan. Don't do fuck all, and then don't even attempt to like fight mid game and just wait for like 100 Thieves to scale better. It was just kind of crazy. Like it was
They
a
tried to
really
play to
bad
the
game out of
dragon
TL in my opinion.
They tried to play to the dragon win condition, which is totally fine in my opinion. I don't think there's any problems with doing that. But again, it was that one fight where they start up the dragon, they don't clear any vision, and 100 Thieves is just able to punish them because they have vision over the wall and TL doesn't have vision over the other side of the wall. And so 100 Thieves got the jump on them in the fight and just it completely erased two members right away. And so I don't think that TL was necessarily doing nothing. They looked at the win condition as we can get soul before the other team scales, but by losing one team fight, they just immediately lost the scaling fight because you're already just stalling out the game that much longer by losing a team fight and getting the other bot lane ahead from picking up those kills at the dragon fight. And so while I do sort of agree that TL didn't do that much, it's not like they did nothing. In my opinion, I think they could have played more around top. You see Bwipo constantly proxying the lane. Like, is there a game where that guy's not proxying the top lane? Anyways,
That's
so
funny.
to me, they could have made some plays top, but I mean, every time I saw Bwipo hitting the tower in the top lane, 100 Thieves was like kind of bringing, or rather, Santorin was on the other end trying to contest a dragon, and so I could see the argument that if you're going to play the Renekton into the Ornn, you should be diving top more often or something like that. But even diving an Ornn is not that easy, so I don't know.
Um, yeah, I just thought really good game out of 100 Thieves. Like they did exactly what they needed to do, and as you mentioned, in that one instance that kind of flipped the game was like punishing TL's mistake of not properly, getting vision of dragon. Like
Yeah,
it's one of those things where, you look at, I feel like this is something that we see in the middle of the season where a team might be slumping and it's just like they're missing the simple steps. And like not sweeping vision, like that's like step number one,
that's pretty
which is
troll,
like
honestly.
going on there. So I don't know if like I'm not abandoning my Team Liquid hype. I just like, I mean, maybe if they truly believe that they have the like scaling in that draft or something like that, or like they thought that they were going to win that game post like 25 minutes, then yeah, I mean, I guess I'd have a problem with their
I
thought
don't think they
process
felt
there.
they had
But
the scaling. I don't think they thought we have the scaling late game. I just don't think they thought it would go late game. I think they thought they would win around Dragon and be able to get the soul win condition before 100 Thieves scaled. But
yeah, but
uh,
but I just think that when you lose that one, which
yeah,
stops
I
the
agree.
snowball, like
Your
you need
margin of
you
error is
need,
very small.
but you then
Yeah,
need to aggressively play for the next one because even
I agree.
because if you don't get that one, regardless, like let's say you win the fight but don't get it, like you've just lost another 5 minutes, which gives 5 minutes to the other team who's like scaling insanely well with Ornn items, Azir, and Aphelios.
And then you had 100 Thieves play against CLG,
Yeah,
and well, I mean,
the CLG
duh.
is a bunch of dirty inters. I mean,
We'll
we'll get
get
into
to them
them.
a
Like,
little later.
there's literally nothing to say about this game. Like,
But
contracts into the
Closer,
game. Like,
yeah, Closer was absolutely styling on them with the Xin Zhao. He was kind of popping off, and then we saw who he bring back the set. Who he set is freaking good. There's no surprises there. That game was just what we thought it would. And
yeah,
so
he
100 Thieves
literally
sent
was
them
just
there.
like he just like was playing with his dick out in lane the whole time. Like he would just walk into a bush and Poom would be forced to back up, or he would just run up to Poom and Poom would like have to walk back because what you're telling me you're not gonna back up when a set's walking at you. Like yeah, like yeah, sure, like CLG was inting it, but like once again felt kind of
Yeah.
like classic 100 Thieves again with Closer running the early game, playing for bot side, and then we had like self sufficient top lane and then roaming mid lane. So
And it was good to see 100 Thieves, even if it is against CLG. They still got the 2-0 on the weekend by beating the other team that won the lock-in tournament. So you could point to CLG, but let's point to TL more so and say like this team is finding ways to win games, which is something that we weren't sure if they were going to be able to do. And we thought they would bounce back. And well, they clearly did that even quicker than some may have anticipated. Let's say. So good start for 100 Thieves. FlyQuest was the other team that went 2-0, but I think we would both agree. Well, I guess I'll ask you. There is a world, right, where FlyQuest is easily 0-2. Am I crazy?
yeah, I mean
Yeah, I'm
both
crazy, or yeah, yeah,
like
you agree.
both of their games like kind of just devolved into chaos at a certain point. Their first game, LG, was a little bit more stable, although they did try to throw a couple times. Kind of by I don't know. It felt like from the FlyQuest side in those games. Obviously, they whipped out the Smite top laners in both games. Jenna in the first game, Karma in the second game, and it sort of felt like they weren't 100% practice on this strategy because they did do what it was supposed to do in the early game, acquiring early
Yes.
dragons, diving bot lane. Like with FlyQuest, we saw a ton of 5-man dives towards the bot side of the map. Tons in both games where we saw like 5 versus 3 dives, either with the intention of blowing a solo laner's TP to come like try to save the dive, or committing to the dive and getting like
Yep.
getting a 3 for 1 or getting a 2 for 1 or getting a 2 for 0. So I think FlyQuest, in terms of their early game with this strategy, did exactly what it was supposed to do, but it did feel like they didn't really know what to do in the mid and late game. Sort of,
Yes,
they didn't
absolutely.
they didn't know how to balance the side lanes because it did feel like in both games, Jenkins and Licorice were getting a ton of push in the side lane, especially in that second game. Like Licorice was at like inhib tower at like 16 minutes into the game or something, or like maybe it wasn't that early, but it was really early into the game where Licorice was just all of a sudden on like inhibitor tower.
Yeah.
And you could sort of see like FlyQuest panic, like do we need to go like match this guy in the side lane now, and like what's going on? But it sort of did feel like their problem solving throughout the game did sort of they kind of figured it out where they actually in both games kind of ended up having Johnson go and match side lane, and Johnson was like he was uber fed in
Monster
both of these
fed.
games because they were playing the early game so well and getting their bot lane so ahead with these 5v3 dives. So he was easily able to match solo lane champion, which in majority of cases, ADC walks into the solo lane alone and he's like even with the other person, like you're gonna fucking die. But he was like 4,000 gold up or something, whatever. So I think credit to FlyQuest for kind of being able to sort of problem solve on the fly when they, no pun intended, when it sort of felt like they didn't know what to do. But on the flip side, like you could also say it was equally the other team's fault for not really knowing what to do and kind of like falling into the trap of not having their top laners play exclusively in the side lane, because I think in both games, in the early game, yeah, sure, like bot lane was kind of doomed on both of those games, but top lane was getting all the resources. Top lane was getting 2 to 3 towers, and then at a certain point, the enemy team was like, "Oh shit, like they're stacking dragons, so now top lane, you need to come down here to sort of fight." And then they sort of lost a whole lot of side lane pressure. Like they were just really weird games, man. I mean, at the end of it, FlyQuest ended up with the 2-0, but like you said, like they could have easily been 0-2.
Yeah, and I started off with the pessimist take of like they could easily be 0-2, and let's be honest, that is true. They could easily be 0-2. However, when you have these new kinds of strats, a lot of the games are learning the strat as you're playing the games. Like you can't tell me this is a team that has a tremendous amount of practice on this. Sure, they practice it in scrims. I have no doubts there, but these are strats that because they're so new, there's still a lot to learn about them, and we might still be learning about them. For, I don't know, for months to come. Who knows how long that this stuff is still going to be in the game? because it doesn't look like that meta is going away anytime soon
We'll get to
necessarily.
that
So
later, actually, but okay.
I mean, we'll have to wait and see. Um, I think specifically with the CLG game, that game started off actually really clean. I think both teams played it really well. However, as the game, like every 5 minutes, the game became more and more of a fiesta, pun intended.
Pretty
Like
much.
that game was well played for 5 minutes, and then every like I said, every 5 minutes after that, it just got worse and worse and worse until we got to really late game, and we really saw some question mark plays all over the map. Like I don't even know. You got Tukui TPing to Baron as Graves is hitting your inhibitor tower. I thought for sure CLG was going to be able to backdoor the game there. Obviously, they weren't able to, and CLG's macro is terrible. That's a story for another day. But the point is that there was a lot of mistakes on both sides in that game, but that was also one of the reasons why it was also really fun to watch. And
Yeah,
so
a bit troll.
even though even though the game was super messy, it was still hella fun to watch. And I don't necessarily blame them for the game being messy. I think that's less to do with FlyQuest being a bad team and more to do with it's a new strat. Teams are still learning how to play these styles out. And I think that's something we're gonna see some messy games for a while, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
For sure.
One last thing on FlyQuest that I want to touch on. I mentioned to you while we were watching the games that like Johnson is super fed, but he didn't really do all that much to get fed. And while that is true, I don't think I gave him enough credit for what he was doing in team fights. We saw him absolutely pop off on the one team fight that pretty much swung the game in their favor. And like that's what an 80 carry is. You get the
Thanks,
resources,
OP,
and your
man.
job is to carry, and your job is to carry now. And so we saw that specifically on the that Jin game. He was so incredibly fed, and he did throw once, but I kind of want to give credit to Luger on that one because Luger kind of caught him out and made a nice play there. But regardless, most of the game was really solid out of Johnson, considering he got all the resources. And so after rewatching the games, I think I didn't give him enough credit when we were initially watching the games. You and I thought that he was just like, oh, he's Omega fed, but his team got it for him. It's like, sure, that's what carries do. Like people always try to give gold to the carries, and so maybe I just didn't give him enough credit at the start.
Well, I mean, I think out of our 2-0 teams, FlyQuest is probably the weakest. Um,
Yep.
they didn't even play that great of teams anyways. They play
Nope.
next week. We'll get into that in a little bit, but they're a team to look out for. They continue to win, then it's gonna be like, oh shit, they're winning still, and they're not supposed to be winning.
Well, especially if they're the only ones to adapt this style. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of teams. Have we seen any other team play the
No,
Janna top or the?
well,
We haven't,
not
right?
in NA at least.
Right. So maybe they're if being able to adapt to the meta quicker than other teams is a skill.
Yeah, and
So
especially for your perceived weaker teams, picking up wins against the good teams at the start of the season, especially, is super important. If they want to make a
yes.
playoff push, and even if they're in playoffs or playoff seeding, like the first games of the season are vastly more important for the lower tier teams than it is for the higher tier teams. So, next week will probably be a test for them, and picking up any wins, from here on out against good teams is only beneficial to them.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the 1-1 team. Who we starting with, Jinter?
Yeah, we got TL and EG. I feel we'll go into TL because we did kind of just recently talk a little bit about them. I
Yep.
think we can both recognize that this team is obviously a really good team. Like, not ready to like hit the panic button at all, or even like drop them like below number one. Um, like, dude, let's be honest here. They probably have the best like individual players in totality in the league. Like, if you look at their full roster, like Whippo, Santorin, Bjergsen, Hansama, Core JJ, like
I think it's the best.
if
It's the best team we've ever seen in the LCS on paper, in my opinion.
yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
even better than the TSM lineups. I know the performance was really good of those TSM lineups back in the day, but as far as on paper, pure star power, I think it's this roster,
yeah,
honestly.
I mean, I think you could for now safely say at the minimum, like Whippo's the best top laner, Hansama's the best ADC, Core JJ would be the best support. I think
Yeah.
you could argue they're better performing mid laners and junglers at the moment than Santorin and Bjergsen. But
Mhm.
like, it'd be crazy to say that these guys aren't going to be contending for the best in their role, or at the very minimum, be top three. But
Where I want to start. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was
Sorry.
just going to say my main problem with the TL roster, something we even saw as lock-in, is just sometimes they just revert to inactivity. I think that's
Hmm.
kind of a thing that we've seen with Bjergsen centric teams in the past. Is mid jungle is obviously the most important duo in the game and has been since like season 9 basically. And in a few locking games, especially in ones against Dignitas and this specific game we are talking about 100 Thieves, like they just kind of revert to this inactivity when things are either going well or things are either going bad, because it's just like, well, if they're going well, like, well, let's just farm it out and keep going. And if it's going bad, it's just like, oh, okay, well, we'll play for scaling. And that was one concern I had initially before. I mean, I wouldn't even say concern, but like that was like the one area where I thought TS or TL could be weak, was because Bjergsen centric teams tend to be very early game. Like they don't tend to be very active in the early game. And we're seeing a
Mhm.
little bit of that right now, and I don't like what I'm seeing when we see that version of TL.
I want to touch on that because I think I was kind of going the same way with it. The the way I think that I was going with it myself is that we heard during the broadcast, I think it was Azale start praising Ayla for saying like we don't even recognize that Core JJ is missing. Like he stood in really well. And while I do think he is standing in really well, I do notice Core JJ missing to the point that you were just making. We're not seeing this team make a whole lot of plays. Core JJ might be one of the best playmakers we've ever had in the LCS. And so while maybe Ayla's playing well, maybe it's not what TL needs right now. They need someone to be able to make plays because if it's not Bwipo, it's not really happening all that much. So
Yeah.
that's the criticism that I have right now is like I think that we are missing Core JJ, and while I don't even blame Ayla, I do think he's playing well, but we need a better playmaker if you're TL. That's what I'm saying. Um, so I think that the thing is we can't expect Core JJ back at any specific time. I don't know if there's any updates that you've heard,
Nope.
Jinter, but I have not. And so for now, this is what you're going with, and you're going to have to find someone that can step up and make plays. You and I both thought that Santorin was the guy to be able to do that. And while I still think he will eventually be, he hasn't been so far.
Yeah.
So that's where the criticism lies there. The other thing, though, is that if they're picking Bjergsen and Zillion mid, I don't mind if they play slow, honestly.
Oh, I
I
mean,
think that champion by
yeah.
itself is absolutely amazing. So that champion's just nuts. And then Bjergsen's obviously the best Zillion we have in the league. So put that on top of the other thing, put one thing on top of another, and you've got a perfectly fine reason to play slow, in my opinion. Because I think that champion is insane. And then you have Hansama, which is usually going to play like a Jinx or some hyper carry and just go batshit crazy. That is a recipe for a win, if you ask me. However, you can't always get Zillion. Why he's even getting Zillion, I don't know. Like, ban
Yeah,
that
like,
forehead.
dude, I don't even care. Like, you need to just respect ban that champion, like, permanently. Like,
Yeah,
it's
honestly, I agree.
like,
Right now, it's so strong, and it's Bjergsen's best champion, or one
yeah,
of at
yeah,
least.
like even when Bjergsen would whip it out in the past, like it was a champion that wasn't very meta and wasn't like insanely strong. But like, man, like I know, like solo queue stats don't tell the whole thing, but like Zillion is like the best solo queue mid laner, like rank one NA and EU players. I don't know about LPL or LCK. They're playing Zillion. Like I think Felix is like number one on EU right now. He only plays Zillion, something like that. And like one of the I don't remember who the mid laner is, but there's like some NA mid laner who's like number 3 on the ladder, or was 3 a couple days ago, and he's basically just been one tricking. Like I said, those numbers don't tell the whole picture, but like this champion is really strong. It's Bjergsen's best champion statistically in his whole career. And I feel like we need, like, have we not reached like who he Aurelian Soul like vibes here? Like just ban
Yeah.
it, bro. Like I don't care who you are. I don't care how good you think you are. Like take a hit to your ego and say like, bro, we need to ban this champion or we're gonna lose the game. Because
I realize it's always easy to say like, oh, just ban this champion, and not think about well, that means you're leaving someone else open. But in this instance, I don't care. You can't tell me there's three champions that are more ban worthy than Bjergsen and Zillion. That's where I'm going with it. Even if yes, you have to leave something else up, I feel like almost always that other thing left up is worth leaving up and not giving him the Zillion. So
yeah, I mean, sure, we're gonna be oversimplifying it when we say like just ban it, but at a certain point,
yeah,
like nobody's punishing the pick.
yeah, I agree.
Like you need to punish his pick before level 6, or at least before level 9 when he has maxed double bombs to just infinitely push the wave.
Yeah,
Um,
Immortals left that open, and then they just had PoE play a control mage and just slowly scale and not really like.
yeah, that's
Okay,
dog
you got to
shit.
see it. You got a slight CS lead against them, but so like it didn't matter.
Yeah,
Last thing I'll
the more
say
and more I see Victor, I think this is just a bait pick, dude. Like, I don't know, like
I
I've
don't think
seen.
so. I think Victor's strong. We'll talk about TSM in a bit, but yeah, I think Tactical might have other things to say about the Victor after getting completely popped a couple times this weekend. I think the Victor's good. I just think you need to play something a little bit more punishing in lane specifically, rather than just a control mage that's going to scale. If you're going to play it into the Zillion specifically.
Flip
Um,
over to EG then, I guess.
hold on, because I wanted to add one more thing because there was something that stood out to me that TL is doing in these games. So there's been a lot of trading Herald for Dragon, and in most cases, the team that gets the Dragon and gets the plates has been winning out on those trades. One thing I've noticed that TL has been doing, and I think this is in big part due to Bwipo getting. I mentioned earlier how he's just getting like the advantages in lane and just proxying the lane and then rotating over to Herald. I think because he can do that, you're having TL be able to get some of these Heralds while keeping their bot lane in the bot lane and farming. While yes, you still have like they're losing pressure and they could get dove, they're not getting dove. And that's something that TL has been able to do really well, which is like a really good little bonus in your macro. If you're able to get the Herald without rotating your bot lane still gets the bot lane farm and you're getting the Herald, which is a little bonus and hasn't been punished yet. So that was something that I wanted to point out, and I think that's mostly because of Bwipo and the advantages that he's just getting all by himself in the top lane.
Yeah, I'm just kind of waiting. Right, like, don't get me wrong, I totally understand like value that having Rift Herald bring, getting tower plates, taking down a mid tower, taking down a side lane tower, and just generally like gaining pressure on the map because you do have the Rift Herald and you have the threat of placing that Herald, and then when you actually do place the Herald, like the team has to respond to it. But like
Mhm.
I'm 100% more on the side of trading Rift Herald for bot side control, which equals a dragon, and then waves and plates bottom. Like, especially with the pool of AD carry champions we have right now, with two prominent ones, I think, in my opinion, being Jinx and Aphelios, at least the most played. Obviously, Zeri's catching a lot of bans. So we'll have to see if where that champion sort of fits into the meta. If it's not permanently banned, you just can't be like letting these AD carry champions just like get this whole early game influx of gold. Like
Yeah.
the champions are too good on 1 and 2 items. Even like Jinx, I think. I was talking a bit earlier about Jinx versus Aphelios, but like on 1 to 2 items, 1, 2 to 3 items, like Jinx is better than Aphelios. Man. Having a Jinx with like Gale Force PD or like Gale Force Rapid Fire or Gale Force like Runans, like the shit is just so strong, man. Like this was always something like, I mean, we're talking about Cloud9, but I'm just gonna insert them in very quickly. LS has always been on the side of never rotate your bot lane for Herald. It's bad because like the golden XP trade off is not worth it. And the more and more that I continue to see it happen, I'm like, yeah, dude, like he's right, bro. Like bot laners are just getting like an extra 500 gold for staying bot lane and pushing their waves and getting 2 tower plates. Then the enemy team is getting on the return. Like basically, the Herald only becomes more valuable if you manage to get the 2 plates, break the tower, not lose it on the other side of the map, and then the bonus is like you have to get the next charge off, and we rarely see like 2 charge heralds in LCS
Mhm.
unless you've just
Yeah.
like won a team fight and placed the herald. So the whole Dragon versus Rift Herald conversation, I know it was sort of like that was the whole play, at least like in season 11, was like, okay, trading the first 2 Rift Heralds for the first 2 Dragons, and we're gonna get that gold lead is better. And I think I was kind of on the opinion of like the Rift Herald side, but like I think I've sort of flopped over to the, like I'd rather have the Dragon than bot side. Seems
Yeah.
better. I don't know.
My very quick stance on it is if you're in solo queue, I think Herald. You get way more value out of Herald in solo queue, and there's not as much coordination that teams are going to punish the dragon as much. Maybe in higher solo queue elo, maybe. But from what I've seen, mostly like I think Herald is way more value in solo queue. In pro play, it's the team that gets the dragon and stays for the plates. They're winning that trade every game. It seems like so.
Every
That's
game,
my
like
quick. That's my quick 2 cents on the matter. Let's go EG now, like you said. Where do you want to start with EG? I got mostly bad, but some good.
I mean, we'll start up with their game against TSM because they played pretty well that game. I think for the most part, it was a pretty. And he got the pentakill on Zeri. That was like it was the first game of the season. So it was the first Zeri game that we saw. I think there was only one other Zeri game in the whole week. But you know, I thought AG played pretty well in that first game. I mean, I don't really have any complaints about that game specifically.
For me, so I guess I have a little bit more to say. I think for this specific team, I did not think JoJo had a good weekend, and I've heard very little talk about him this weekend. I thought that he looked quite bad, honestly. I thought that he looked good in lane specifically. He's like the opposite of sneaky effect. He's like the JoJo in lane is like Pog. He's out pressuring the other mid laner, but afterwards he's getting caught a lot. There's like the TP play where he just TPs into TSM's jungle and then Spica's just like, oh, free kill and pins him against the wall with the poppy, and then they just kill him. He's getting caught in side lanes. The one I will give him, he got caught in a side lane, but like his team was also sieging bot lane with Baron while he's in the top lane, and they got way more value out of that. That's like okay. Do I think he needed to die there? Not really, but like that's kind of it ends your siege. Like you EG gets a tower and whatnot, but TSM is able to stop the siege after that because it's a 5v4 at that point. So honestly, I don't think he needed to die there. He's just dying needlessly quite a bit. And then there was the Cloud9 game. I mentioned how he has prio against Fudge, but still doesn't get over to Dragon in time when his team is very clearly about to start a fight. I rewatched that fight a few times, and I'm like, EG must be saying in their comms, "Yo, we can engage on Dragon here. Oh, you have prio mid. Let's come rotate and we could fight this." And JoJo takes forever to get there, even though he had like, dude, just drop the 3 minions there if you know your team is about to engage. They must have been saying that in comms. And so I didn't think JoJo had a really good weekend. And yeah, I mean, you guys know I'm always going to call out someone when I don't think they're playing well or where they're not getting the criticism they deserve. This was a weekend where I did not think JoJo looked good, and I think there's a lot of growing pains as far as macro is concerned for JoJo.
Yeah. Obviously, I think in have that one really bad play where he did PG game. I obviously didn't like at a certain point, like he just got like rolled by Cloud9's comp, and there was too much he had it all off, like permanently running at him. I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
faulting
no, that
JoJo.
is fair.
I'm
No,
not
that's fair
faulting
because
JoJo a ton in that game, but I do think it is a problem when you are into Victor versus Enchanter matchup. You do get that CS lead, but you're not using that lane advantage and that CS lead to help out your
right,
team, and that is a problem.
right.
While he did play the lane well, but like it just it reached a certain point where there was that one critical team fight around drag, they lost it, and the game just felt like it was over from there. Exact same, like copy and paste, exact same scenario from Cloud9's previous game where there was a fight around drag, they got wiped, and the game was over.
No, and that's actually my point is that the one drag is what lost him the game, and I think he should have been able to rotate a lot quicker. When I was rewatching the game, I'm looking at like they're not showing him. I'm only looking at minimap. I could see that he's like clearing up the rest of the minions that are mid, but like he already has prio. He's got the wave push. Like the wave is pretty much crashing under Fudge's tower, and so he has prio and can rotate a lot quicker, but doesn't. And that is where they lose the team fight or the team or the game, in my opinion, is on that team fight. And that's where I thought like I'm like he needs to rotate. That's kind of his fault. I think there's a little bit of fault for Vulcan for taking the blast cone over and leaving Danny a mile away. There's more than one person that's at fault there, but to me, I think the prior you got to rotate there, and that was a big reason why they lost. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the one kind of saving grace for Evil Geniuses in the game against Cloud9 was Impact in the top lane on the Tryndamere,
yes,
because he was doing it. I thought it was a great last pick in that draft, which Tryndamere is like kind of like this. I don't want to say lane dominant champion, but it's a very good laning champion, especially against other melee champions where you do have the W to slow people and reduce their attack damage, and you have insane chase down potential with the E, with the Gale Force, whatever. But it felt like it was kind of on Impact's shoulders to carry this game in the side lane. It just felt like I was talking about this during the game, but like he fucking built like shit, dude. Like he was like uber fed Tryndamere, and he just started building defensive when he needed damage, able to cut through either the front line or the back line that he was diving. It reached a certain point into the game where yeah, sure, EG had lost that drag fight, but like Impact wasn't really winning. He wasn't not winning side lane, but it reached a point where he couldn't kill Summit because Summit either finally figured out like how to use his hands and to E in and out properly, but then also like Summit was just straight up winning trades in the side lane, like in these short like bursty trades. It feel like if Impact played that game a little bit better, like they should have won because he was just like dumping on side lane so much, and like it was clear that Cloud9 was like having to consistently bail out Summit in the side lane from Impact. But I just thought his build was weird, man, and like that was like another reason. I think EG like could easily win that game. Like
I see. I fell on the other side of the coin there. I didn't think that his build was the reason they lost the game. In fact, I honestly don't mind his build
I
because it
guess
was so AD heavy on the other side. And I think that was one of the reasons he was just shitting on side lane is because he was ahead. He was able to build a little bit of armor and he was still able to kill Summit when needed. And he
maybe
did that.
maybe I'll rephrase, not to say why they like lost the game, but why they didn't win. Felt like that was like an easy.
You think their chances of winning go up if he builds more damage than tank? I think I
Yeah,
get right. That's what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I just personally don't necessarily agree with it. I think that regardless, I thought his build was fine. He was still shitting on side lane. I just think there was some macro plays where they lost team fights and gave up too many dragons and ended up giving soul away. Where like Cloud Soul was really valuable for Cloud9 in that game. Like that was a good soul to have, and I think that was one of the reasons that made the game even harder. And I will say to their credit, so first of all, I want to echo what you said. I thought Impact had a great game, and last week I said I want to see him perform on something more than just Gwen. that was a game where he performed on something more than just Gwen. That was like a really good game out of him. The other thing where I want to give credit for EG is that even in the final team fight against Cloud9, where they lost, they ultimately ended up losing the game. I thought they played that fight really, really well. They were in a tough position. I think they realized that team fighting was really difficult, but they had to find a fight. They were able to find it, and they were able to erase Fudge on the Soraka, which is like the main goal. That's how you want to start that team fight. Um, However, there was just too many GAs, and the game was just too far out of hand by that point. I didn't think the team fight was poorly played by any means. I thought they played it really well. I just think they dug themselves too big of a hole earlier on in the game.
Yeah, and I think as you said, I completely agree. EG played that exactly how they should be. With hey, we need to try to kill the Soraka ASAP to knock it off all the healing, and then they sort of did like the double flank. Like I think Impact was running up from sort of bot brush near the Raptor camp, and then Inspired flanked from that wall above the river. And they basically just collapsed right on Fudge, killed him away. But I think credit to Berserker, like just flashed the wall and like re-entered the fight and just killed everybody because he had wasted all the resources on killing Fudge. And like you said, like I don't think EG did anything wrong there. Like Berserker was just too fed at that point. Like
Yeah.
Cloud9 was playing heavy bot side, in the mid game with Blabber. Sort of like Blabber would take his camps, Blabber would take the mid waves, but like they would take mid and then they would just like hover Berserker in the bot lane. He picked up so much farm and so many tower plates in that game. Like he was 5-item Aphelios like at 30 minutes or something. Like he was full build like so early on to the game, and like Danny
Yeah.
only had like 3 items I think for the majority of like that late game.
That team fight, he goes and like starts hitting some minions mid. I think he thought the team fight was lost, and he's like, "Oh wait, you guys all got GA and you're still alive." He comes back to the team fight
Well, I
and
think he
just
did that to get.
erases
I think he
everyone
did that to get more
to build up
shurikens.
his shurikens now. Okay, I've heard chakrams, shurikens now. I've heard like a billion different pronunciations, but I get your point. Like
People call him the shuriken.
he went to go build up the white gun. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, and then he came back and just erased everyone. So I mean, there you have it. Well played by him, well played by Cloud9, and their strat that they went for paid off, and so they kicked the crap out of EG because of it. Let's move on to some of the O2 teams,
The
some of
dog shit.
the uh-ohs.
Yep.
Where we start? Let's start with TSM. Okay, we put it in the title. JNT, just real quickly, is TSM doomed?
Well, I will throw it back to one of our earlier episodes that we give our
Uh
90-50-10 prediction. My
huh.
50% prediction was that TSM wasn't going to make playoffs.
I still
And
think
the
it's a
zero
50% chance that they make. I'm believing still.
all I'm saying is I'm off to a good start with that.
Yes, you are. You are. However, I didn't think TSM played horrendous. I think they just had a lot of trouble making things happen. It's not from lack of trying. Last year, I was pretty critical that TSM didn't really do much in the early game last year. And even though that's kind of what happened this week, I think a big part of that was Biofrost just being able to answer everything TSM wanted to do. We saw Spica invading quite a bit, as I mentioned earlier. I will say his Poppy wasn't the greatest. He got hooked a lot, and again, I think Bio just outplayed him. Like I didn't have any issues for any of the plays that Spica was going for. I just thought that Bio had better answers, and so it made Spica look quite bad. Um, I was watching Mark Z's stream today, only for like 10 minutes as he was doing some of his prep for his blame game, and he mentioned how like he wished that the MVP jungler wasn't put on Poppy, and I thought that's an interesting take. I don't hate the Poppy honestly, but I want to know your thoughts on that, JT, because I could totally see the argument that like let's put Speak on something where he can have more of an impact than Poppy. Maybe he could carry the game on a different champion. What do you think?
Well, I think Poppy counterpick into J4, but it's also like Jarvan. Just because there's Poppy W existing, like that doesn't mean J4 is completely useless. Both games where we saw Pika playing the Poppy and the enemy jungler playing Jarvan, we just saw the Jarvan do the smart and correct thing and wait for Spica to either be CC'd before EQing that the Poppy can't throw up the W, or just straight up, as you mentioned, like way back at the top when we're talking about Dignitas, just like flash ulting. Like if you know that Poppy has W, just don't use your spells that are gonna get you fucked by Poppy W. Like
Yeah.
just flash R. And I think the Poppy pick was good at the time, and I think Spica played it like, yeah, sure, he got hooked and he was getting caught out a couple of times, but like, I think the other junglers were just playing better and were just playing around the fact that this spell existed and they were just doing everything that they could. to not get W'd and not get countered. So I think, to me, I didn't mind the poppy pick at all. I think the poppy pick was good. I just give credit to the other junglers who are playing the Jarvan and doing the correct thing and not using EQ when they weren't supposed to and just flash Ring when they were supposed to.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm not ready to give up on why I don't think it's doomed for TSM is because I thought their imports, which were like to me the biggest question mark coming into the season, because I didn't know anything about them. I thought they both looked pretty good. Specifically, I thought Shenyi had a really good rel game. Unfortunately, TSM just wasn't ahead enough to follow up on some of his engages. He had a nice counter engage in the bot lane. They ended up getting the kill in lane, which I thought that was a good play on his part. There was another pick where he made I think it was a flash ulti play coming from the Senna fog or whatever that really um, caught them off guard. And I think Danny flashed out. I think it was Danny. I think. Anyway, someone flashed out and just made a nice play, nice reactionary play. But also, Hooney was kind of like AFK as like that engage is happening and not ready to follow up. And I was like, clearly, you think like there's three TSM members walking towards the enemy. Like Hooney should recognize, hey, we're about to fight, and he's kind of walking in the wrong direction. So I was kind of confused. I was like, where is Hooney going here? To me, that wasn't on Shenyi. I thought that it was a good engage, and the fight didn't go their way because I think Hooney was AFK. And so I don't know. It wasn't all bad. The week for having an O2 week. Let's just put it this way: the other teams that were seeing O2, I guess more specifically Immortals and CLG, they looked way worse in their O2s than TSM did. I don't think TSM is nearly on that level of bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think their LDL imports, like, they're pretty good. I mean, Kaido seems like a really good laner. That's one thing I'll
Hmm.
give him, and I do think I agree with you that his rel game was pretty good. They got a 2v2 kill in that game early on. Obviously, could sort of translate that into any sort of mid game lead or anything like that. But and I think Hooney's solid. Like, I think Hooney played well in lane in both of those
Yes, I
games up
agree.
against the Gwen.
And
Like, I feel like,
yeah,
the Graves into Gwen was like a really was just a pick we've been seeing. It's like a common counter to Gwen. Like, oh, like I'm just gonna play for lane and kind of farm up. And like normally the Graves just doesn't get that far ahead, or Graves doesn't get a whole lot done in lane. But I think Hooney was doing a good job in that game. And also I thought his Jace into the Gwen in that first game against Evil Geniuses was actually good. Like, he was hard winning all of the side lane trades. And I think I'm more interested to see if we see Jace as a counter pick to Gwen, because it is a lane dominant pick, which is obviously what you want to pick against the Gwen. But also the way that the trading patterns were sort of going, like Hooney was heavily winning out on all of them, really smartly using like EQ for poke to potentially burn the Gwen W. If he doesn't use the Gwen W, well then he gets the damage, and then he'll like QW in melee form and then E out right as Gwen is supposed to, use her 4-stack Q slash, which is like the one where he gets the purple bars underneath. So
yeah,
I think Hooney
I
I think Hooney had a good weekend. I'm more interested to see if we do see more of the Hooney Jace, because last season Jace was one of Hooney's best picks. Um, and I just think that in terms of a 0-2, like I'm not off to like is TSM doomed. Like, I think they looked pretty solid for a 0-2. I just think that their team's just better than them, and we're like we just gotta wait for TSM to sort of find their identity and sort of get this thing rolling, because I just think there are better teams in the league than them. But I don't think
I
TSM's
hundred
bad.
I 100% agree with the Hooney looked fine in lane and in laning phase rather and in side lanes. I think he looked great in those. I was literally only pointing to one
Yeah,
team fight,
yeah.
which
No.
I don't think that really does him justice for the good weekend that he did have. And then a lot of the criticism went towards tactical, and I think rightfully so. Because he was kind of just playing a little bit too much in the face of a victor, and he got punished a couple of times for it. Um, I said to you that I thought the game was going to be thrown by tactical just getting popped. I wouldn't say that those plays were necessarily throws, but they were what led to them getting behind. Like a throw is like if you're winning and then you kind of gave the game away. I wouldn't say that he necessarily gave the game away, but he definitely gave leads away or gave the lead to the enemy team in a couple of times, just getting a little bit too aggressive and just not respecting what Victor can do. And so that was kind of a problem with tactical. I did not think that he had the greatest weekend because well, you can't just walk up to a brush that's got a Victor in it, especially when you have it warded. He had it warded, he just got popped, and well, that ultimately ended up make them fall behind, which then ended up to them losing the game. So I think we should be able to expect better things out of tactical. We've seen better things from him in the past, and he didn't have the greatest weekend either.
Yeah, I mean, I think TSM will be fine. It's just more if they can surpass the teams that are in front of them, because I think as of right now, um, there are the other 6 teams that are above them in the standings. Maybe not FlyQuest, but better than them. that's not a knock against TSM. That's just middle of the pack teams are doing quite well right now.
Okay, who are we going to next?
We'll do Golden Guardians because we
Okay.
can touch on them briefly. We kind of talked about them a lot already. We're talking about Cloud9 and FlyQuest specifically. Golden Guardians in both of their games, they were going up against some wonky strats. Obviously, Cloud9 had the Ivern mid, and against FlyQuest, you had the Karma top lane. I think when you took a look at the Cloud9 game from the Golden Guardians perspective, I think you can kind of come away from that with a little bit of confidence because their early
Yes.
game for the most part was quite good. When you look at the lanes, I think their solo lanes, they weren't really getting the leads I think that they were supposed to. I do think though that a lot of people recognize R is supposed to be a counter to Renekton. But like Lickers is down like 25 CS. I don't know if you're supposed to like lose that hard. But he was kind of like he was playing well with Pride Stalker to sort of kill Summit in the side lane on two separate occasions. And then if you look at mid lane, I think the way that both LS and Caedrel sort of described that matchup, it does make me think that like, okay, well, like this is actually a lane that Ivern at the very least can sort of go even in and not lose the lane. So I did think initially that like, well, you're against this Enchanter mid, like you're supposed to win that lane and go up CS and have the push. But I think looking back on it, it actually does seem like a matchup that is quite even. So I think can't really look at a Blazolve and sort of much for not getting as far ahead as I thought he should have. The main thing was though that like in that Cloud9 game, like they just made one mistake and lost the game, and I do
Yeah.
think that is sort of a byproduct of what will happen when you go up against these kind of strategy with these enchanters and with Ocean Drag specifically being the Dragon Soul that Cloud9 was offered. Because I think even like Pride Stalker was playing well. Like he ran top, got a kill, ran bot, got a kill, and then I feel like they got a little bit overconfident, and then they just went for that bot dive and they fucked it up, and then the drag happened, and then the game was over. Like I don't know. Like I don't come away from that Golden Guardians game against Cloud9. It's like, oh fuck, like this team sucks. Like they don't know what they're doing. It's just like they had a strong early game. It just made one mistake and the game was over. Like I don't know.
Yeah, so what I put in my notes here is that I thought Golden Guardians played well enough to win for like 90% of the time in both games. But there was just like a couple of mistakes in each that just kind of threw their leads away.
Mhm.
The one against Cloud9, we mentioned how he got a little bit trigger happy and went after C9's bot lane, and then Winsome just Sona ulted him again, barely in tower range, and that completely swung the game away. The other thing, there was one more mistake in that game, and that's where they kind of go heavy chase after Summit while Cloud9 just takes Soul. That was the other like hello. Those were like two mistakes in that game that pretty much made them lose the game. Whereas like most of the time I actually thought they played really well. The other game, what was the other one?
The
Um
FlyQuest game.
FlyQuest one. Right. This is where there was another smite in the top lane, and Pride Stalker was like obviously not having a good time. I thought Pride Stalker still did a really good job considering he's going to get invaded all the time. Somehow he still ended up with a CS lead in the jungle over Jose Dioto, which is really difficult to do when they're constantly invading you. So I thought that, yeah, I thought Pride Stalker had a really good weekend, and I thought for an O2, this is one of the best O2s you can have to start a weekend. Now, where I thought they didn't look so good was Olay is quite trigger happy with the Rakan R. So many times they're looking for fights or trying to engage fights they just don't need to do. The Corki was getting really fed. A Blaze Olive on the Corki was poking out really, really hard in that game against FlyQuest. You just need to play the poke game, and you're going to push them off the objectives rather than they like went back on Baron and tried to flip it and then ended up just losing the game to FlyQuest when they had like an 8K lead or something like that. Like just like some small or yeah, I don't want to say small, but like very few mistakes that ultimately cost them both of their games. And like I don't know, man. I think this team still looks pretty good, all considering.
Yeah, I mean they're similar to sort of TSM. I think they're 0-2, not like 0-2. You look at it and go like, oh shit, like this team's 0-2, like they got a lot of problems. Like I just feel like we need to sort of watch more games out of this team.
Yeah,
I think that's just the main thing. Like we need to like see 2 more weeks and reassess where we're at because I think I mean again I'm not looking at the schedule right now, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if this was like 3-3. This team was 3-3 after 2 more weeks, or just
yeah,
two
I
and
wouldn't be
four,
surprised either.
or 3-5, or 4-4 after 3 or 4 more weeks.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the last thing I'll say is that there was one play that I want to point out with Olive on the Corky where he goes in with the package and completely splits up the fight. I thought it looked so grief him going in, but he actually put his package in a perfect spot. And again, like I said, he split up the fight perfectly, and FlyQuest couldn't re-engage because they would have to walk over package and just get roasted. That looked like that was such a clutch play from a Blaze Olive, and like that's the kind of shit I want to see. Like that kind of aggression is what's going to get them wins. As long as you're able to execute on it properly, and that was a play where he did. And so, just big shout out for Olive there because that play was really nice and ultimately swung the game in their favor until they eventually threw it. But who's next?
Yeah, we'll talk about the inters. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, we'll do
Pick an
immortals
Inter.
first, but I mean, personally, like, I feel like there's not a whole lot to talk about either because like they're just running it down. Like,
I want to get Immortals out of the way really
okay,
quick. I
fine,
don't I
go
don't
ahead,
have I don't have a lot to say about Immortals.
go ahead.
I just they are the team when I was talking earlier about teams that are rotating to Herald and just losing out on that trade, they are the team doing that. But the one play that was just it summed up the weekend is where they start the Herald and then Xerxes, this is the Bean Soup Award right here, by the way. Xerxes gets hit by the charge of Rift Herald and then gets hit twice by the Rift Herald doing that long, big swing that he does that anyone can dodge. I think Jat even said this weekend, anyone with hands can dodge this. And then, of course, Xerxes gets hit by it twice. So as they do that, they also send revenge to the bot lane rather than sticking to the Herald. And so they're not even able to end up they're not even able to pick up the Herald after they finally get it, and they end up getting clapped because Xerxes couldn't dodge Rift Herald 3 times, man. 3 times. And he also got hit by the Jinx R, but that's more forgiving because I mean, you hit one person, it kind of makes a big explosion. But like that, the game was just over there. You let TL split bot, which what's going to happen if you go Herald? You're either going to have Trin that stays bot and splits, or Jinx. Both of them are great at taking towers. You're just it's such a bad trade. It's a bad trade already, but it's even worse trade when you're against a Tryndamere or a Jinx. It's going to be one of those champions in the side lane, which are great at taking towers, and so you always lose that trade. And then they even while they're doing the Herald, like I said, he gets hit 3 times, so the execution on it was even bad to begin with. That play was such bean soup and just completely lost the game that I was like, wow, this is going to be a rough year for Immortals if these are the kind of plays that we're seeing.
Yeah, Xerxes didn't one player that we've talking up. Whenever we talk about immortals, like a vital piece of this roster, and it's one of the reasons why this team was sort of finding success to begin with. Even was that team kind of fighting for sixth place last year. Um, but yeah, nobody on
And then
this team,
they didn't ban
nobody on this
Zillion.
team is playing well. Like I can't point to any person, any singular person on this team, be like, oh, they had a good
Yeah,
weekend, or oh, they had a good game.
you're right. There's the one play. I don't even remember which team it was against. I know it was against Ezreal and I guess it was against Dig. I think they go to rotate through River and Wild Turtle just walks into a Lux binding. He has his E off cooldown, by the way. It just doesn't react to it. Like Lux Q isn't that quick. You should be able to react to that. Anyways, yeah. Like I said, I want to talk about Immortals real quick and get it done with. They were bad and things aren't looking better. It's still looking bad, and a lot of people are calling them the new CLG of this year, and I could see why.
No, CLG is still the CLG.
No,
And
but they are in the sense that it's all like it's mostly veteran lineup and they're still
oh,
not
okay,
performing.
yeah,
That
yeah,
yeah, I should
okay,
have been more specific.
yeah. Okay, CLG contracts is making his case for worst player in LCS.
That's where I was going with this.
Yeah.
I was going to say that the only and he can't shine at all because he's playing with the worst player in the league right now. Sadly, that is contracts. I the thing with CLG
Sorry,
is like
you hold on. You froze, so can you just rate whatever point you just made?
yeah,
Just
what did
that.
I oh I yeah, no problem. I said that Luger is the only player that's playing decent right now, but it's hard for him to look good when you have the worst player in the league playing on your team right now, which is obviously contracts. He is running it down in every single game we see him play, mostly or both games this weekend specifically, a little bit in lock-in as well, but whatever. Um yeah. Okay. The standout plays. The first one that comes to mind is the Diana play. So there's the blast cone, and people are going to point to Palafox that didn't angle himself right, and he didn't bounce over the dragon pit with the blast cone. That to me was not the end of the world. Like he was still able to walk out just fine. Contracts jumps back over and ults with no clear of. There's no one who can follow up and then has to flash right over. So he's done for the fight now. He's got no flash and no ulti on Diana. And now the fight's just over. Like there's no angle there. I don't know what he's seeing that he thinks that's the time to fight. His Olaf was terrible. Or not his Olaf,
Trundle.
Trundle. Yeah. Just walking into people with like no follow up whatsoever.
Dude,
Again, like I don't see
I
the angles that he's seeing here.
I 100% thought that was going to be Trundle top in the game against FlyQuest. I think that Trundle, especially if the enemy team picks tank engaged support, Trundle top is like the perfect answer to enter top lanes with the Smite who roam specifically. I think Trundle is the best wood pusher in the game. Like you have Sheen and Demolish and W with that thing. Like you actually melt through towers harder than any champ. So I was just kind of disappointed in the fact that they didn't throw the Trundle top lane. And I was like, okay, Contract is still playing Trundle. Like Trundle's still a perfectly fine jungle pick. But then he just fucking ran down so hard. I mean, like my worry is about Contracts in this specifically. You've seen in the past Contracts struggle when he doesn't have the best laners on his team, and he's kind of got to be everywhere. But it's actually the reverse, and the team is struggling because
Yeah.
Contracts is not doing anything, and the only thing
There
he's
was the
doing
one
is
weekend
dying.
where it was Jenkins absolutely running it down, and like we pointed to, yes, Contracts was making mistakes, but there was that GP game where Contracts was definitely the problem, and it feels like we've gotten to this point where like that cliche, like you hear it in traditional sports all the time. You're like, someone's got to step up. Well, it's like with CLG, it's like someone's got to step up and not run it down for once. Like there's always one player that is just sprinting it on this lineup, and it's like they're always just the obvious reason for why this team is losing. That's the problem that we've seen so far. If there could just be one or two games where there's not someone absolutely running it down, maybe they have a chance. Because I
Maybe.
don't I don't think Palafox has played particularly amazing, but I don't think he's played that bad either. Um Poom, I think he could be a little bit better, but again, like they're not losing the games because of
Their
Poom.
top
They're
side
losing the
is
game.
bad.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I actually thought Jenkins looked fine this weekend. The only thing is against FlyQuest, he got a free lane, so take that for what it is. But his Kennen game looked fine as well. So like I thought Jenkins actually had a good weekend, good bounce back for after he looked completely troll before. But Contracts looked oh so bad. What else is there? They refuse to start Baron twice with Elder buff against FlyQuest. Like, what are you waiting for? Like, you need to do something to get back in the game. You have Elder, take a fight, start the Baron, flip the fucking game. Like, do something. FlyQuest was doing everything they could to lose that game, man. And they're
Yeah.
just CLG's not taking any risks whatsoever until it's like an absolutely terrible risk. And so the only other thing that I want to say, and I'll shut up now with CLG after this, is like, remember last year how often we heard Peter Dunn talk about how good Contracts was? And to be honest, I do actually think Contracts looked good last. To be fair, when he was playing with EG, he actually had some good games. But like now I got this conspiracy that like they were just trying to bait someone else into getting Contracts. Like there could be a huge montage of how many times I've heard Peter Dunn say Contracts is one of the best junglers in the league right now, and like CLG took the bait, man. CLG took Contracts, and now he's gone back to his old inting self, sadly.
Yeah. Unlucky for CLG.
Yeah. Okay. What's next, J&T?
Well, um, Champions Queue officially came out today. I know that both of us were watching a few streams, games that were going on, and if you have no idea what we're talking about when we said Champions Queue, if you didn't know, basically Riot has created, organized, I think what people are just calling it, even though it's not really what it sounds like, is the NA Super Server, which is basically just all the top LCS teams, the top academy players, the top amateur teams. They've all been invited to an exclusive server that's based out of California for the purposes of creating, highly competitive solo queue, quote unquote, where it's only if you can get onto I think it's run on Tournament Realm, but basically it's invite only. You have to be either in the LCS, on an amateur team, on an academy team, or if you're just a solo queue player, masters and above, you have to apply to get into it. Yes, I'm pretty sure it's masters above. I can check, but
Yes, it is.
it's
It is.
masters and above. You have to apply for it. And also, like, a bunch of former pros were invited to it. Like, so for example, Lorlo, like, he was on it all today. I was watching it. But I think it's, this is exactly what it feels like North American pro players have been talking about for the last 4 or 5 years, and like it feels like we're at the last straw. Like they need to either like shut up about this. Like they need to shut up about this. Basically, like this is what you've been asking for. Sure, it's taken maybe it's like 4 or 5 years too late. But if they come out and it's like if it's 2 months past this thing and like they're not playing it and they're like saying like oh like it's not working, like I feel like it's their fault at this. I don't even know what to
Yeah,
say.
I agree. I agree. Pretty much everything that the pros have been asking for is in this thing for the most part. There's nothing I could think of that stands out as to be missing. Um, the one thing, so there was a call on Hotline League tonight of someone who thinks it's actually a bad thing, and I think they're just wrong flat out. They were basically talking about how it screws over all the East Coasters, and that's something we have acknowledged ourselves. However, I think the benefits outweigh the cost here
Yeah.
because what they've come up with seems like actually a really good way to get people involved. I mean, it's early, but we're already seeing a lot of people that are really happy with it. There's still things that they can improve on, I'm sure. Um, but the problem for me is that like we've always had solo queue and it's never worked, right? Like there's never been a system that actually works that people actually care about. So, because that's the case, you need to try something different. And that's what this is. No one knows for sure whether it's going to work or not, but we know that the status quo that's happening right now, it's not working. You need to try something else. And yes, people that are on the East Coast, especially up in like Quebec or even more east than Quebec, for Canadians, it's really going to be bad for people out there. However, it's going to do a lot for the pros that are or for people that are already pros or already aspiring to become pros. The environment gets so much better. And we've heard a lot of people complain from like imports specifically when they come over. They say they have a hard time maintaining their gameplay level because the solo queue is so bad. This should, in theory, should help fix that problem and make a better practice environment for when you're not doing scrim. So there's a lot of good stuff to point towards with this system.
Yeah. I also forgot to mention that LLA pros, Latin America pros, and all the professional teams over there they've already been invited to it. I think that's good. I mean, from what I was
I don't know what the
watching,
ping is. I
I
don't know what the
think
ping is over
I
there, but it
was I
probably helps
was
them as well,
it's about
right?
60, so it's better ping
There
than
you go.
should it's better ping than if they were just playing NA solo queue because they get like they're
Yeah.
just
More
playing.
obviously.
Yeah, and so
And so in that case,
it's
you could make the argument that it's better for not just North America.
yeah, and it's West Coast servers, so I don't know exactly what the ping is for all the people based out of LA and LA because they're with the LCS or with the Academy team. I have no clue what it is, but I assume it's probably in like a low digit number. If it's not in the teens, it's got to be like 5 or 8 or something like that. But I think that be a system like obviously like it just came out today. They've obviously incentivized it by adding a prize pool. Don't know, there's a $400,000 prize pool for Champions Queue for the top players over the course of 2022, kind of doing it in this like various format where basically is like every single month the top player will get the most money, and there's a whole website for it. I guess website just can't championsq.lolesports.com, so it's kind of built into the LoL Esports website.
You
Um,
could find it somewhere, whether you find it on
yeah,
Twitter or
yeah.
on Reddit. You'll
And
find it
they
somewhere.
have they
Yeah.
have leaderboards of all the players who are like who's number one in terms of LP. Like they even have like cool little like sites for it, like what player has the best KDA and everything like that. So it there seems to be like a lot of thought put into this, both with how they've designed it, the incentives, like the money incentives for the players, and also I think adding amateur and LLA pros is also a good because these are people that we've constantly probably and at one point be in the LCS. Like we've seen some of the top LLA or Brazil players or whatever emerging regions it is. Like a lot of those players end up coming to North America. It'd be good for them to get the extra practice, and presumably these amateur and academy players are going to be the future of the LCS, at least the North American players going forward. So feels like the release of this is hopefully going to be good. It'd be pretty disappointing to see if it just dies out within half a year or a year and people like I said at the beginning, it feels like this is everything they've been asking for, and if they continue to complain about it, I would just be kind of annoyed at that point
Me
because
too.
I mean I recognize that sure it's been annoying just in general for the whole community hear about professional players complain about solo queue and complain and say how NA doesn't have a chance because of these things. well, now you have these things, or at least you've started to have these things. Hopefully, NA's gonna win Worlds now, baby.
So, definitely big credit to the LCSPA that pushed for this. Big credit there. The other thing, let's ask the question, and I can answer first if you want me to, J&T. But let's ask the question: does Champions Queue save NA in air quote? Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go?
Well, I
If you were to
mean,
predict, because there's no way of knowing for sure. This is just a prediction game here.
it's definitely gonna make our region a more competitive region, and if that's what people are asking for, then yeah, sure, it's gonna save North America because I think everything that people have been talking about with North America is like, oh, this region's not competitive. Oh, this region has no chance on an international level. And oh, like apart from the one team, which is normally Cloud9, that makes it to quarterfinals at Worlds, like no other NA team is basically consistently making out of groups. NA so bad, whatever. So I think this is gonna magically make North America like contend for world championships, and like North America is gonna get up to the level of LEC or LPL or LCK. No chance. But this definitely will help the region in the long term, so is it going to save them right now? Are we going to see like NA contend at Worlds in the next 2 or 3 years? But in 5 or 10 years, so, yeah.
Honestly, so my short answer is yes. I think it will save NA, and not even that. I think it, like you said, I don't think it makes North America an automatic contender to win Worlds, but it has to improve the level of gameplay. It just has to. Now there is a world where, like you said before, people aren't as interested in it, and they just don't end up using it for whatever reason. I don't think that's the case though. But if that world does happen and they don't end up using it, then we're still stuck to where we are now. But I do think this is something that will stick around because it answers all the problems that we've heard NA players talk about for so long. The ping, obviously, you don't have to hear as much complaints about OTPs like one tricks. So that's something that you don't have to hear that much about. Toxicity should go down. Like these are all things that are like honestly just bad for the mental of a pro player, and anything that can improve one your practice environment, but two your mental as like someone who's continuously grinding at doing the same thing every day, playing the same game, anything that can improve your mental for that, I think is a big plus, and I do think that it will improve the region. To what extent that I'm not so sure. I don't have like a strong opinion on how much better North America will get, but I do think that the region will get better. And so in the end, I think yes, it will save NA air quotes again, but I guess only time will tell. And it makes me wonder if like pros will come from, or not even necessarily pros, but just other solo queue players from other regions would end up trying to come to North America if they could get their application approved.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, there was people. Was it Nemesis that was like, "Oh shit, let me go play in NA." I mean, he might have been memeing. There's totally a chance that he's just memeing, but I could see it happening. I could see like if NA solo queue, or it's not solo queue anymore, Champions queue does become really competitive and it is a good environment. I could totally see someone wanting to come over and compete for it.
I guess what I would say to that is like, why would they not just play like if they're not a person who's like EU, yeah, I'd be like, sure. Like if you're in China or Korea, just play their solo queue. It's
Yeah,
probably still
well,
better.
China, I believe, has their own
Well,
like
yeah,
prize pool thing.
they have a bunch
So
of different super servers. I mean, I think the of LS has talked about this, but like the biggest and most like
yeah,
prestigious one is like Ionia or something.
yeah.
So
Anyways, I don't know much about that, but I could totally see a world where people actually move to North America to play solo queue if they're already like streamers or something along those lines. But who knows? Who knows? All right, what's next? We got predictions.
yeah, we'll run through these predictions real quick.
Week 2.
Yeah, week two. First game Saturday. Dignitas versus EG. What we
Oh,
saying here?
I'm gonna go with the upset, JNT. What's the
Taking.
upset?
Oh, hold on. I forgot already. The predictions.
Oh,
We're supposed 7-3. There you go.
okay.
We're
All
keeping
right. What
score.
What do you think
Uh,
the upset is? I'm going with the upset, but what do you think I think the upset is?
taking Dignitas is the
I
upset.
am taking Dignitas.
I'm gonna stick with EG. I just think that problem in this matchup is the soul lanes of EG are just straight up better than the soul lanes of Dig.
Honestly, these teams are both good right
They're
now. So
good,
like
yeah.
I don't even feel that confident in a Dig pick, but like I wouldn't feel that confident in an EG pick. This feels like an unlikely game to be a 50-50, but I think it is a 50-50. But I'm going Dig.
I'm
I'm hopping on the
around.
party bus or the hype bus or whatever the hell they're calling it.
I agree with your estimation, but I will take EG.
Yeah.
I still think they're more of a solid team, and I think they're just better. 100 Thieves versus Immortals, 100 Thieves, obviously. Immortals
100
is
Thieves.
now the other matchup.
I am
Cloud9
gonna go
versus Team
Team
Liquid.
Liquid. I think they will be able to punish what Cloud9 has up their sleeves. Are you sticking with your boys,
I'm gonna take
JNT?
Cloud9. Um, basically only because Core DJ is not playing. I think if Core DJ
Okay.
was playing, I would take TL all day. But I feel like this is the exact time where we're gonna see the situation play out where either Cloud9's gonna get their preferred Enchanter mid lane matchup and they're gonna want to take it, or TL is gonna go with the route of banning the Enchanters and Cloud9's just gonna say, okay, now we just have our whatever mid pick we want to play, and you've now just wasted bans on Enchanters. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm more likely predicting that we're going to see sort of standard out of Cloud9, but I do think that from what we know of Summit, yes, Summit didn't have the greatest weekend, but Summit should be somebody that is going to be able to contend with Whippo in lane.
That's true. And
So
another counterpoint against TL is that we mentioned earlier how they haven't been the greatest at finding ways to make plays right now. And well, if you
Blabber's
don't do
doing it.
that, Cloud9 will outscale you with with a full
Yeah.
enchanter comp. So there's that as well. But anyways, I'm still going TL.
Okay, next
Just
up,
Cloud9, you need to ban Zillion.
Golden Guardians versus CLG, the battle
Golden
of zero
Guardians,
two. I think I'm going to take Golden Guardians.
not even close for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, if there's any hope for CLG, they got to win this game, man. Like they need to win
Yeah.
this game.
TSM over FlyQuest for me. I have the O2 team beating the 2-0. Let's be honest, FlyQuest did not look all that clean in their wins. You could even argue TSM didn't look all that clean in their losses as well, but I think TSM's still the better
I
TSM.
think so too. I think, all cards are off the table. Should FlyQuest pick the Smite top again? I do think that it might not, it'll both help and hurt them picking the Smite top, because if they go that route, they'll have another week of practice on it. But at the same time, TSM will have this now extra week to prepare should FlyQuest want to bring that strat out again. But I just think the strat is really strong, man. Like, especially if you go the route of 80 jungler with hypercarry ADC, you play for bot lane, you make these 5v3 dives happen. I think it's a really strong strat, and it's just about playing your mid game cleanly. FlyQuest obviously didn't do that, which is why their mid game's so sketchy in this previous week. But
I think TSM leaves it open. I think they leave Janna and Karma open,
I'm
and I
I'm
think
going
they just
I'm going with TSM, but I do think like I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see FlyQuest pick the Smite top and they beat TSM. So
TSM's gonna have a few picks ready for if the Janus Smite does come out. I think if you're FlyQuest, you need to not let Gwen open. Don't do that. Gwen is like too much of a disgusting
yeah,
champion right now to
that
let
champ's
free
broken.
farm. But I think TSM will have a few picks ready that they're like, oh, you're gonna give us free farm? Fine, we'll take it. And yeah, so I'm going TSM. The next day we have Immortals versus Cloud9. Immortals is garbage. I'm going Cloud9.
Agree. TSM versus Golden Guardians. We now have them both at 1 and 2. So the battle for 2 and 2.
Ooh.
I'm gonna still stick with TSM though.
I am gonna go Golden Guardians again. How much of a fool am I, JNT?
That much. I mean,
Okay, good.
there you go.
I thought the O2 of
EG.
Golden Guardians looks better than the O2 of TSM for what it's worth. So
Fair. I think both of those teams look decent for being 0-2. So I
yeah, I
wouldn't be
agree.
that's a matchup where I see as a coin toss. So next up, maybe match. I mean, C9TL is probably the best match of the week, but second best, close second. EG versus 100 Thieves. Still gonna roll with 100 Thieves.
Me too.
Based off from what we saw last week, the team looks solid. They're just going by the books, and I think it's going to take some creativity from the EG side to make the upset happen.
I got EG going O2 this week. Feels wrong. Feels wrong.
Yeah, they're going to be one
Anyway,
and three, huh? You're going to have your second power ranked team going
I know.
1 and 3. It's crazy. Team
Well,
Liquid
to be
versus
honest,
Fly.
I would push them a little bit. I mean, that's how I power ranked them going into week one. That would obviously change. I would have 100 Thieves above them now. But anyways,
Team Liquid versus FlyQuest. I'll take Team Liquid.
Team Liquid, and then CLG versus Dignitas. We're both going Dignitas because you are disgusted with CLG.
Yeah, and that would then put both both CLG and Immortals 0-4. So I think we'll be circling the calendar for CLG versus Immortals for whenever that match occurs to see who's going to win their first
So
points.
not only do I have EG going 0-2, I got Dignitas going 2-0, putting them at 4-0 in first place after 2. Maybe I am a psychopath. All right,
Dang.
quick news.
Yeah, we got a little bit of quick news. First thing that is not really esports. I mean, it is esports related, not LCS related, but it's cool nonetheless. Tyler won Big T, T1, has left T1 the org. Um,
Yeah, I don't have anything to say on it really. I'm
I
just like,
just
oh damn.
I just thought it was like really cool when it came out because I feel like it was just a beneficial thing for both sides for both of their brands because
T1 T1.
T1 rebranded like SKT T1 rebranded T1 like a year and a half ago. Everyone has known Tyler One as T1, so when it got announced, I was just like, oh shit, T1. It was just like it was great. I don't think we'll see Tyler One sign to any other org that's not T1 basically. So I mean, be his own act himself now.
Yeah.
But hey, we got the videos with fakers, so that's all we
Yeah,
needed really.
that was freaking hilarious. Worth.
Next up, we kind of already saw this past weekend, but the LCS team are back in the studio with the option to play remotely. But now the LEC is also bringing back their players into the studio for next week.
Yeah, this to me is more the significance of this is that like I think we're getting closer, knock on wood, to getting fans back in the stands, which is that's more important to me than having the players because I think just hearing a crowd again is what makes it more exciting in my opinion. So that's what I'm more looking
I don't know
forward
if
to.
we're
But
anywhere close to that, but
why not? You're seeing it happen in the ERLs. You're seeing them fill up fucking stadiums and shit like that. You could fill
yeah,
up a
but
little
EU
things.
kind of has COVID more control than.
Well, then we see it in the LEC, which is great.
Oh,
I mean,
maybe.
I would love to see it in
Okay.
both
I
regions,
guess I thought
honestly.
you were
But
more talking about LCS, but yeah,
well, either one is what I'm
yeah.
looking for, honestly.
Next up, yes, I'm gonna skip the order real quick because
Okay,
um,
okay.
we somebody I think you quickly said this when we were talking about FlyQuest earlier, my top laners, but today, I think it's Riot Jag is his name who does the patch previews. Tweeted out
Hmm.
that they're changing support items for solo lanes next patch. Next patch being
Oh,
12.4, 12.4 coming out next week. So I think we're going to see this strategy either heavily nerfed or completely removed from the game.
gotcha.
Presumably, like the one change that I heard from, I think it was actually LS on Twitter, was talking about this at some point last week. Because I think I Will Dominate tweeted out something like along the lines of like, Riot's not gonna be able to like nerf this or control this or whatever. And LS was like, why not just make it so if you take Smite, you can't buy the support item? And I was like, that seems like the perfect solution to this strategy. Whereas if you take Smite, you can't buy the support item. So there you go. So
Yeah,
it's gonna get changed. I think I don't know if it's for the better because I always like when teams come out with these innovative strategies. Normally the teams come out with them and then they kind of go into solo queue, but we kind of saw the reverse here where it got popularized in solo queue. Teams are not picking it up. I don't
I
know.
got my quick take on it. My quick take is I'm loving seeing the Smite top. I think it's a lot of fun for a viewer. I just want it to go away in a month or two. Patch 12.4 is a little bit earlier than I would have wanted because I think it's a lot of fun for a viewer to see a bunch of new stuff. I think it takes a while for these strats to adapt to, so I don't think we're going to get the full time of what it takes for that to happen. But in the end, like come a few months, I would have wanted to see top laners having a real top lane again. So I'm totally fine with them making the changes. I think overall it's good in the long run.
Lastly, you were interested in this at all? Presumably, a lot of people were interested. Doublelift, first episode of his new podcast that he made called Trash Talk, and
Hmm.
his first guest that he had on, LS and Caedrel. So
And it was
obviously,
great.
yeah, it was great. I mean, I watched it personally. I watched it live when it was happening on Sunday night. I know for them it was like 11 PST on the East Coast or on the West Coast, sorry, and Caedrel was like first thing in the morning. But for me, it was like 1 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. I had a great time. It was totally worth staying up for it. I mean, it was hilarious. It was interesting to sort of hear LS talk about with Cloud9 and them coming over so late, and then their whole thought process behind the Enchantress mid, and LS also kind of gave some really good insight to how Cloud9 has been working with their quote unquote 10-man roster, if we want to call that, but them sort of doing the internal scrims with their academy teams and Budge doing a lot of 1v1s with the academy mid copy to sort of help, sort of speed up the learning curve of these Enchantress mid lane because
Yeah.
the most important part about it is just like playing the lane phase and not losing not losing as hard as possible. I just think that like if you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's a great listen. I mean, it's like 2+ hours, but it's worth it. I mean, it's hilarious.
I feel like a lot of people are going to listen to this and be like, "Why are you promoting your competition?" Like,
Dude, it's hilarious. I
to
don't
be
give a
frank,
shit.
yeah, to
Like,
be frank, we just don't give a shit, guys. It's good content, and if we find that there's something that you guys might want, we're going to share it. Go find it if you haven't found it already because it's great. The one thing that stood out to me that I wanted to talk about was LS was saying like there was a chance that some of their strats were getting leaked because they heard that Ivern was going to be banned or something like that. And I don't remember who it was. One of them pointed out that like, well, you could see that Copy was playing Ivern mid in one of his solo queue games,
Doublelift
and
said
so
that.
yeah, and so I guess what I recognize there is like, okay, even though it's a big advantage to be able to hide some strats by playing your academy guys, when those academy guys go to solo queue, you could just scout what they're doing in solo queue and kind of get an idea for what Cloud9's going to bring out on stage. And so there's a little bit of a there's a little bit of a weakness or a fallback, if you will, for having your academy squad so involved is that you have more options to scout to figure out what Cloud9 is going to bring out that way.
Yeah, I guess it's just a bit surprising because I know like a lot of pro players, LCS pros especially, like they have secret solo queue accounts where like they play on and you don't know that it's that pro, and that's where
Copy
they
might want to
do.
look into
Yeah,
that.
like I think he's got to make a secret account, or if he's playing weird shit, like play it on your secret account, bro. Like, I mean, who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe it was on a different account and Doublelift just that was copy, but either way,
Yeah.
like those are strats you save for secret accounts. Cause
Well, I wondered. So, what the other thing that it made me think of, because we knew that Champions Queue was coming out, I wondered if people were going to try to get into Champions Queue with a name that no one recognizes and just be like, "Oh, I'm just someone."
well, it's
Like,
on the. I think that would be funny, but it's on tournament realm. So especially if you're like an actual LCS pro or an amateur player or academy player or LLA player, you have to use your tournament realm account. Or like even when you get invited to it, you need to have a tournament realm account. So I think even if
you
you
make
had
some
like
other account in solo queue, J&T. Hear me out. You make another account with a totally different name, and you're just like, "Oh, I'm
get it
just
to
some
challenger and
aspiring
apply,
master player." Yeah, yeah. I'm just an
you got to go
aspiring
into the
masters player.
Discord and like have a voice changer. Or
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, great podcast. Would recommend.
we recommend.
Yeah, we recommend. Looking forward to more of that. One quick bean soupery that I wanted to throw out before we close out the episode was Astralis' twit longer, where they're talking about how things aren't going their
Oh
way right now.
no, man.
But at the start of the twit longer, they're like, "Oh, by the way, yes, Promise Q is still on the team," which is like, that is so BM to your play. Like, I made it very clear last week. I am not a fan of Promise Key whatsoever. But what a dumb thing to put in a twit longer that, like, obviously Promise Q is going to see. So you're just highlighting the fact that everyone wants you to get rid of this guy.
I
And as
think
much as I don't like Promise Q, I just thought that was so dumb and so BM to be like, oh yeah, we're still keeping him even though we know he's dog shit.
I can somewhat see the thought process behind it just because like obviously Astralis is the worst team in the league, and
Yeah.
if they put out like a statement in a twit longer or anything, don't you think
Hmm.
that the first thing that's going to come to mind is like, okay, they're benching Promise Q for somebody else? Like would like that I felt like, but I just
Even
mean like
still.
I think their thought process of it was like, well, we're just going to put this at the beginning to save time if anyone clicks on this thinking that we're benching Promiscu by saying, "Oh, we're not benching Promiscu," but it just looked like it just didn't translate at all. Like it just looked like, oh man, it was
I didn't like the idea
honestly it
of
was
putting
so
out
funny.
I didn't like the idea of putting out a twit longer in the
No, it
first
was like
place.
no,
Like,
that was a dumb idea to begin with, but just then the way they went
yeah,
about it was just
they
stupid.
said a whole lot of nothing. Like, we're not happy with how the games are going right now,
Like
and
no
I
shit,
just like
dude, you
all
haven't
that.
won a game.
It was all fugazi twit longer, and then by the way, let's BM our player first by saying like we're keeping him before we say anything else.
Or
Huh?
they're either 0-7 or 0-9 or something.
I think they heard me say that they should go after Advian. That's what I think. And I think they were like, "Oh shit, Blue Jay makes a good point here. We can't let him be right." That's what really happened.
Damn.
Honestly, they're probably getting a lot of pressure to go after Advian. That's probably why they said it. But even still, that's a dumb thing to say. Just say
Yeah.
nothing, man. Say nothing. You can't say anything to make fans be like, "Oh, it's okay. They're trying." Of course they're trying. Everyone knows that. Anyway, that was some bean
I don't know,
soupery.
dude. Promiscu, I don't know if he's trying.
Dude, he's trying, man. He's just bad. It
He's
happens all
trying.
the time.
He's hitting buttons. I don't know if he's like hitting them with the intent of hitting other people.
Contracts is trying to.
Hey, dude.
Bad players are still trying, dude. There's no like Niles tried last year, Finn tried last year. These are like I am never the guy that's like, are these guys even trying? No, they're trying. I promise you they're trying. It's just it's hard to be a fucking pro. It's that simple.
Hard to
But
ink that
anyways,
much, dude.
all right, let's close out the show, J&T. Huge shout out to Slugger, honestly, for the 10 gifted subs, and who else? Somebody else subbed. Honos? I can't remember his name. Thanks to everyone who did sub, and thanks to everyone who donated bits. We
Orbo,
appreciate you all. Yeah, Borbo. Huge shout out to Borbo for the donated
legend.
bits. We appreciate you all, and we will see you guys next week, same time. This has been episode 72 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.